Chapter 2652. Chu Yang had always been puzzled. His strength was clearly not inferior to Donghuang's, and he felt that he was already above the Demon Empress. However, the Demon Empress could entangle the saint for quite some time, but when it was his turn, if it wasn't for the heaven-layered divine technique, his Dantian, and the Calamity Sword, he wouldn't be the saint's opponent at all. These were probably the magical effects of his luck. Mo Qinggu blinked and asked, "In that case, the saint only needs to turn over a new leaf, and he will really be invincible in the world?" This sentence made everyone laugh. A leopard cannot change its spots. Chu Yang smiled. If he wants to obtain this power, the first step is to destroy all his 10,000 saints' true spirits. Do you think he can bear to do that? Everyone burst into laughter. But thinking about it carefully, this was indeed the case. Since the sage had already reached this step, even if he knew that turning back would save him, it was impossible for him to turn back. This was because his first step had already been wrong. Starting over from the beginning wasn't something that a person like him could do. With an extremely evil mentality, he would not feel that it was a sin to do those things. But once he came to his senses, just the condemnation of his conscience would be enough to drive him to his death. So, he can only be evil to the end, because his wickedness has already reached the point of no return. Chu Yang sighed. He remembered that there was a sentence in the book that he got from that strange palace: "Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately." This sentence probably meant that no matter how cruel an evil person was, as long as he laid down the butcher's knife, he could become a Buddha, a transcendent existence. But after that sentence, there was another sentence written by that mysterious person. That sentence was, "A butcher's knife that could be laid down was definitely not a real butcher's knife. A real butcher's knife could not be laid down." To this sentence, Chu Yang deeply agreed. An evil person was an evil person. There was no such thing as no longer killing, no longer being an evil person. This march was unusually peaceful and stable. Along the way, they could occasionally see the experts of Demon Emperor Heaven hunting down the remnants of Saint Emperor Palace. One small battle after another. Every time Chu Yang encountered one, he would order the army to stop and observe for a moment. Then, when he returned, he would always sigh. The archer god and the others also sighed. There are quite a few myriad holiness true spirits among these people. The god of archery heaved a long sigh. Along the way, we have seen quite a lot of people without true spirits after death. Not to mention the fact that the massacre this time covers all 10 heavens and earth in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Just how many will there be? Yes, if we calculate according to the current ratio. The faster the Heaven Imperial Court slaughtered the Saint Emperor Palace, the faster the Saint Emperor would recover from his injuries. Because all the forces in the Heaven Imperial Court are killing the 10,000 saints' true spirit, which is also equivalent to all the forces in the Heaven Imperial Court channeling energy for the Saint Monarch to recover from his injuries. This skill is so evil that it makes one's hair stand on end. Zi Sheqing said with hatred. So this time, Holy Emperor Palace didn't organize a decent counterattack at all. In fact, Holy Emperor Palace didn't organize any large-scale counterattack at all. This is also the sage's deliberate indulgence. Chu Yang said, "The mentality of this kind of person is that he absolutely cannot suffer losses. I would rather destroy the world, but I still want revenge. Harming the world to benefit myself, as long as it is beneficial to me, so what if the world is destroyed? On the contrary, if I don't exist, even if the world is peaceful for a long time, it is still beneficial to me." The god of archery and the others smiled bitterly and nodded. Yes, Cloud Venerable Master was such a person. He was a selfish person from head to toe. Anyway, now, the existence of the experts in the Saint Emperor Palace was insignificant to the Cloud Master. If you want to kill them, then kill them. It's even better if you kill them all. I just happen to need this energy to heal my injuries now. Once the Cloud Master recovers, he will definitely bring about another bloodbath. Chu Yang sighed. Chu Yang only sighed, but he wasn't too worried about it. During this period of time, the strength of his brothers had also improved by leaps and bounds. Especially after they each found their own great Tao, Their improvement was even more obvious. Even the weakest among them could escape from the Saint Emperor even if they could not defeat him. It was not a problem for them to escape unscathed. Moreover, the Saint Emperor now no longer had the mountain river sword, which was a great killing weapon, in his hands. The fairy forest was just ahead. At this moment, Chu Yang unexpectedly received news from the Tianji intelligence department. Donghuang Shui Leihan set up a trap on the way back to the Eastern Royal Heavens to lure the remaining forces of the Saint Emperor Palace to seek revenge. As expected, when they were about to return to the Eastern Royal Heavens, they were ambushed by the remaining forces of the Saint Emperor Palace. Those who participated in the battle included the Prime Minister of the Eastern Royal Heavens, Xue Qi, Donghuang himself, and many elites of the Eastern Royal Heavens. On the side of the Saint Emperor Palace, the Saint Empress personally led more than 300 experts. Both sides fought a great battle, and in the end, both sides suffered great losses. Other than the Saint Empress who escaped with injuries, the other experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who participated in the battle were all killed. On the side of the Eastern Royal Heavens, the Prime Minister was severely injured, Xue Qi was severely injured, and Donghuang was lightly injured. Donghuang has safely returned to the Eastern Royal Heavens, and he announced that Chu Yang will be the Jade Sky Imperial Throne. This news caused everyone's spirits to tremble. However, Chu Yang and the others who knew the inside story felt their chests tighten, and a strong sense of sorrow rose in their hearts. This sorrow wasn't for themselves, but for Donghuang and Xue Qi. This battle. Chu Yang sighed. I really don't know how Donghuang and Xue Qi feel. With the strength of the Eastern Royal Heavens and the cultivation of Donghuang and Xue Qi, if they fought with all their strength, I believe that even Saint Empress Xue Xian wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. However, in the end, Xue Qi was severely injured, Donghuang was lightly injured, and Xue Xian was the only survivor and luckily escaped. If nothing strange happened, no one would believe it. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Strange things? Your Majesty, are you saying that there's something strange about this battle? The 5 fairy gods were puzzled by Chu Yang's words. It was obviously a complete victory, so what was wrong? There's nothing strange about it. I'm just certain that the Saint Empress was able to escape in the end because Donghuang intentionally let her escape. Chu Yang sighed. That's right. With Shui Leihan's scheming and deep foresight, as well as his understanding of them, since they had already set up a trap and waited for the enemy's arrival, and with the help of a super expert like Xue Qi, who had already reached the level of martial emperor, it meant that they had complete confidence. How could they let Xue Xian escape? He even caused Xue Qi to be severely injured. What are you talking about? The god of archery was puzzled. Why can't I understand a single word? Chu Yang's expression was a little desolate. He said, Of course you don't understand. Even Saint Empress Xue Xian, who escaped by a fluke, probably doesn't understand why Shui Leihan, who had the complete upper hand, would make such a stupid move. Or maybe he's rejoicing over his luck, he sighed deeply. Because Saint Empress Xue Xian, besides being the most beautiful woman in the world, is also Donghuang's younger sister. This news was really shocking. Even with the god of archery's cultivation and millions of years of cultivation, he couldn't help but be shocked and dumbfounded when he heard this news. This matter, or rather Donghuang's true identity, Xue Xian herself doesn't know. Saint Venerable Master Yun also doesn't know. Otherwise, in these millions of years, just because of this relationship, Shui Leihan would have died countless times. Chu Yang said lightly. This sentence was really not wrong at all. No matter what Shui Leihan was thinking, he didn't acknowledge his identity and didn't reveal it. But there must be one reason. Once this identity was exposed, the relationship between them would be clear. Then, Saint Venerable would have countless more chances to kill Shui Leihan out of thin air. As for Xue Xian, a woman who didn't even care about her own father, why would she care about the life and death of her own brother? The trap and ambush this time must have caused Donghuang to break off from his heart. In fact, this battle was just as Chu Yang had guessed. The decisive battle this time had really hurt Donghuang, especially his heart. Donghuang was silent now. His silence came from two sentences. They came from two different people, each with a sentence. The Prime Minister was seriously injured. After returning to the Eastern Royal Heavens, he once asked Chu Yang anxiously, "Your Majesty, this time, I really don't understand. Your Majesty deliberately showed mercy to the Divine Empress and even let her go. Is it to set a long line to catch a big fish?" This was the Prime Minister's probing question. Xue Leihan's face darkened and he didn't give an answer. Looking at this good brother, good subordinate and good minister who had been loyal to him for a lifetime, he was actually speechless for a moment. Actually, there was no need for an answer. Because even the Prime Minister, who asked this question, knew that his guess was absolutely unreliable. Now, in the Saint Emperor Palace, all the subordinate forces of Saint Venerable Master had completely collapsed. How could there be any big fish to catch? Then, what was the reason for Dong Huang to show mercy to Xue Xian? There was another sentence from Xue Xian, "Xue Leihan, I won't be grateful to you if you let me go today. You destroyed my and my husband's life's work. This hatred is irreconcilable. One day I want you to die in my hands. Your soul will be destroyed and you will never be reincarnated." Xue Leihan walked to the window and sighed deeply. "You're just too soft-hearted." At the side, Xue Qi, who was covered in wounds, complained fiercely, "The so-called Dong Huang is actually such an indecisive person. I've really misjudged you." Chapter 2653. Now, there were only the two of them in the main hall. So Xue Qi didn't have any scruples when he spoke. Xue Leihan said, "If you weren't soft-hearted, why did you suffer such serious injuries?" Xue Qi immediately shut his mouth. He didn't say a word. Although he kept snorting and his face was full of indignation, even his eyes were filled with pain. "Is this enough for this battle?" Xue Leihan asked faintly. Tears suddenly fell from Xue Qi's eyes. "Did you see our father and mother watching from the sky? Was their friendship enough for this battle? We can let her go, really, because she's our sister, but if she gains power, will she let us go?" The moonlight outside the window shone on the two of them. The fog was hazy, like a dream. This battle was really unforgettable for the two of them. For so many years, Xue Leihan had been paying attention to the Saint Emperor's palace, especially Xue Xian. Although Xue Xian didn't know that there were two brothers with the same blood as her in this world. However, these two brothers always paid attention to their biological sister and never forgot about her for even a moment. They paid attention to everything, including what Xue Xian usually did and what decisions she made. Xue Leihan knew everything clearly. But because of this, Xue Leihan and Xue Qi's hearts became colder and more disappointed. Since that time, Xue Xian used extremely cruel means to kill a few concubines of Shangren Yun. That time, Xue Xian cruelly killed a few children of Shangren Yun. That time, Xue Xian summoned all her admirers to the Saint Emperor's palace. Then, those people all became Shangren Yun's lackeys. That time, things happened again and again. It made Xue Leihan and Xue Qi feel disappointed, hateful and helpless. You killed your love rival. It could be explained as a woman's nature to be jealous. Although your methods were too extreme. But it could still be understood more or less. But why did you kill those babies? Those babies were your husband's flesh and blood. You killed them so wantonly. Do you still have any humanity? If that's all, it's still your family's business, and it's hard for outsiders to comment on it. But you tricked all your admirers here and used their admiration and infatuation to lure them here. Then, your husband turned all of them into myriad saints' true spirits, turning them into walking corpses. What does this count as? This kind of behavior could no longer be explained by innate coldness. This kind of behavior was already insane and inhumane. It made one's hair stand on end. There were so many people who were qualified to admire and even pursue Xue Xian. Which one of them was an ordinary person? Who didn't have a high cultivation base? Who wasn't born with pride? However, it was precisely because they loved the wrong person that they were cheated into giving up their entire lives. Is loving you a sin? When Xue Xian made use of her power to summon all the experts of the Xue clan who had been stranded outside, they were all gathered together. Then he turned all these people into Cloud Master's lackeys. Furthermore, it was at that time that Xue Qi and Xue Leihan's identities were almost exposed and they died an unnatural death. The two brothers had finally given up on their little sister. Xue Xian had lost all her conscience and was beyond redemption. It was only recently that they found out that Cloud Master was really the master of myriad saints' true spirits. Then, there was the best explanation for why Xue Xian tried so hard to gather all these experts. However, this explanation made Xue Leihan and Xue Qi's hearts turn cold. So you already found out at that time? Your husband is the master of myriad saints' true spirits. So Xue Xian was the first person to know about Cloud Master's true identity and background. You clearly knew that your husband was such an evil person. But you still tricked all the people who had feelings for you here and let your husband turn them into myriad saints' true spirits. Xue Leihan and Xue Qi had completely given up on their little sister. However, that didn't mean that they would no longer pay attention to her. Just like guarding against an enemy. Pay attention to her. This time, when Xue Leihan left the Demon Emperor Heaven, he sent a message to Xue Qi, prepare for battle. Trap, how Xue Qi immediately started to make preparations. Therefore, on the surface, it looked like Xue Leihan was returning to the Eastern Royal Heaven alone. However, in reality, the top experts of the Eastern Royal Heaven had already disguised themselves under the leadership of Xue Qi, the Prime Minister and General Lan to come to his aid. How could Xue Qi and Xue Leihan, these two brothers, not understand their little sister's vengeful nature and her strong desire for revenge? In essence, Xue Xian was the same as Cloud Master. They were both ruthless characters who would take advantage of others and would rather die than suffer losses. Otherwise, how could they be together for more than 1,000,000 years? This time, Cloud Master's reputation was ruined and his foundation was destroyed. In fact, he had almost lost his life. With Xue Xian's character, she naturally hated Xue Leihan and the others to the core. As long as she was given a chance, she would definitely take revenge. And Xue Xian's favorite palace happened to be on the path that Xue Leihan had to pass through on his way back to the Eastern Royal Heaven. Xue Leihan was also traveling alone, so how could Xue Xian let go of such a heaven-sent opportunity? At that time, all the people who went against the saint were either accompanied by a large number of people, or their whereabouts were mysterious and unpredictable. Donghuang was the only one who traveled tens of thousands of miles to return to Donghuang alone. And it was the number one enemy. In Xue Xian's opinion, in the entire imperial court, only the East Emperor and the Demon Empress were worthy of fighting with Cloud Master. The Demon Empress was even weaker than them. The main reason was that Xue Leihan had not given up on killing the saint. The East Emperor must be the mastermind of this trap. With such a great hatred and such a good opportunity, how could he not take action? So, this trap was set up. But she did not know that this trap was also set up by Xue Leihan. At the same time, it was also a life-saving move. Therefore, this trap was set up by Xue Leihan and Xue Xian together. Xue Xian would definitely not let Xue Leihan return to the sea, so she would definitely kill him. And Xue Leihan set up this trap. Firstly, it was to destroy the last remaining strength of the Saint Emperor Palace. Secondly, it was indeed to protect himself. If Xue Qi and the rest were not arranged in advance, and Xue Leihan was not willing to disguise himself and go back on this journey, in this trap, there was a possibility that he would be killed by Xue Xian's various despicable tricks. Xue Leihan's guess was not wrong at all. Ever since they started their journey, after the initial peaceful journey of 40,000 miles, they started to be attacked by the experts sent by Xue Xian one after another. These attacks did not really hope to kill the East Emperor, but they were meant to test him. To test whether or not Donghuang had any hidden experts accompanying him on his journey. At the same time, these attacks were also to delay Xue Leihan's pace, giving Xue Xian ample time to prepare and set up a perfect killing trap. After all, the Saint Emperor Palace was now in a precarious situation, like a rat on the street that everyone wanted to beat up. To organize a considerable battle force, and the target of the attack was the world-famous East Emperor. If they did not have sufficient preparation and buffer time, it was basically impossible. The East Emperor traveled alone for thousands of miles and was constantly attacked along the way. Although they were all small-scale attacks, they were accompanied by an endless stream of sneaky tricks. Especially after half of the journey, the frequency of such attacks became more and more frequent. The East Emperor had already guessed that Xue Xian's preparation might have some kind of problem. Otherwise, she would not be so crazy and unscrupulous in trying to stop him. The only explanation was that she was not ready yet. In fact, it was also reasonable. Now, the people of the Saint Emperor Palace were being besieged by the whole world, and they would be attacked by the people of the Heaven Imperial Court anytime and anywhere. On such a basis, it was definitely very difficult for Xue Xian to organize a strong force. Especially since the people of the Saint Emperor Palace were usually high-profile and did not need to conceal themselves at all. Now, the situation had changed with the passage of time. But it meant that the majority of them were exposed to the world. To suddenly face such a terrible situation, the experts of the Saint Emperor Palace had never encountered before, and the losses would definitely be huge. But Xue Leihan believed that with his sister's ability, she could definitely do it. He would definitely be able to do it. That killing plot would definitely be formed. Sure enough, when they were about to reach the East Royal Sky, the large-scale death attack that Xue Xian had set up finally began in a remote mountain forest. Xue Xian personally took action, and more than 1,000 experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were almost all involved in this battle. There was only one goal: to kill Donghuang Xue Leihan. With such a setup, it was not difficult to see how much Xue Xian hated Xue Leihan. Xue Leihan still could not forget that moment when Xue Xian suddenly appeared and looked at him. And the words she said, "Xue Leihan, you beast. Today is the day you die." Then she unreservedly used the charm of the world technique. 1,300 experts of the Saint Emperor Palace also went all out. Facing the peerless charm that was said to be able to charm all the men in the world, Xue Leihan did not feel charmed. He only felt sad, or maybe uncomfortable, and sighed inexplicably. Anyway, he did not feel tempted. Your charm of the world technique might work on any man in the world, but it was not effective on me and Xue Qi. That's because we're your biological brothers. In this world, was there any younger sister who could seduce her elder brother? This was absolutely impossible. Before you could charm him, he gave her a big slap and said, "Stupid girl." But the pressure that Xue Leihan had to bear in that battle was still enormous. Xue Xian was indeed an expert in scheming. Just the choice of terrain made it difficult for Donghuang to move, and he could only choose to fight head-on. In this battle, Donghuang fought 1 against 1,000 in this desolate valley. He fought until the sun and moon lost their light. It was also in this battle that Xue Leihan experienced his sister's true strength for the first time. Back then, Xue Xian was not only the most beautiful woman in the world, but also the most proud genius of the Xue clan. All these years, her cultivation did not fall behind. Just as he took over, Xue Leihan felt the enormous pressure from Xue Xian. Chapter 2654. Although Xue Xian's strength was not as strong as his, there was not much difference between them. She was almost on par with the Demon Empress. The battle went on like a raging fire. It lasted from midnight to dawn. Almost half of the experts sent by the Saint Emperor Palace had died. However, Xue Leihan was also covered in wounds and his vitality was greatly depleted. At this moment, Xue Xian suddenly retreated. She asked while sweating profusely, "Xue Leihan, why did you show mercy to me time and time again?" This matter really puzzled her. In this night's battle, Xue Leihan could easily injure her severely several times, but he did not really attack. Instead, because of these few moments of hesitation, Xue Leihan was injured. This man, this Donghuang, would rather injure himself than kill his enemy? But Xue Xian was full of doubts. Could it be because of the effect of Charm the World? That was definitely not the case. Xue Xian was well aware that her Charm of the World had almost never failed. In the past, she had only failed once on Zihao. Even Yun Shangren had been held back by her charm of the world before he reached a certain level of strength. However, today's Dong Huang was different from Zihao's disdain for her. He was also different from Cloud Lord, who exceeded the limit of her charm because his strength was too high. When Xue Leihan looked at her, he only felt pity, and a kind of hatred. However, he did not have the intention to be charmed by her. Xue Leihan sighed deeply. His heart was full of mixed feelings. You can be heartless to me, to the whole family, and to the whole world. But, no matter how much I hate you, how can I bear to kill my own sister? There's no reason. Xue Leihan was still fighting with all his might. He swallowed the bitterness in his heart. Now, even if I tell you my identity, what can you do? Will you let me go? Or will you repent and turn over a new leaf? There are some things in life that cannot be wrong. One mistake. But there is no turning back. When you treated the Xue clan as your dowry, when you sent the entire Xue clan into the abyss, when you killed your parents and angered your grandparents to death, when you made everyone in the Xue clan a stepping stone for your husband's hegemony, when you made everyone in the Xue clan a stepping stone, his life was already destined. I just don't want you to die too early and too tragically. Xue Leihan said painfully. However, this answer caused Xue Xian to misunderstand something. Xue Xian continued to attack. The beautiful face of the celestial being sighed. She was no longer as seductive as before. Instead, she looked lovely and lovable. She said softly, Your Majesty, I really didn't know. Your Majesty, the Eastern Emperor, had actually been thinking about me all this time? Xue Leihan's face twitched. Nonsense, he shouted angrily. Xue Xian slashed her saber across Xue Leihan's body, causing blood to spurt out. She said with some disappointment, Your Majesty, are you reminiscing about your youth? Are you thinking about the frivolity of your youth? This man actually had feelings for me? It wasn't a seductive feeling but true feelings? This unexpected discovery gave Xue Xian a pleasant surprise. The pride in his heart soared like never before. So much so that he was even more confident in this battle. Since you have feelings for me, you won't really kill me or hurt me. But I can really hurt you and kill you. With just one sentence, Xue Xian, who had changed her strategy, was already deliberately trying to lead Xue Leihan's emotions back to his youth under her charm. As long as Xue Leihan really remembered the love he had back then, even if it was only for a moment. Once he fell into that kind of melancholy and sadness, Xue Xian would be able to kill this terrifying enemy instantly. Xue Leihan said furiously, Shut up. Although he wouldn't be led into that kind of emotional state that Xue Xian imagined, he would be led into another kind of emotional state. That was an unprecedented manic state of mind. The person in front of him was his own sister. This sister of his didn't hesitate to use such a despicable method to deal with him. Including those whom she had dealt with previously, those young heroes who were once infatuated with her beauty and gave up all their feelings for her, those once proud and unyielding young heroes had long since turned into a pile of yellow soil. Little sister, is this how you ruined their lives? Thinking of this, Xue Leihan felt a deep sense of sorrow. Love was originally a beautiful thing in the hearts of people in the world. No matter whether it was successful or not, those memories that belonged to the youth would always be the wealth of a lifetime and the most beautiful memories. But in Xue Xian's hands, they were reduced to a tool. Using this tool, Xue Xian was actually successful in dealing with those who used to like her. Xue Xian Xue Leihan roared to the sky, Heaven has given you an unparalleled beauty, but it has also given you an unparalleled evil heart. Xue Xian smiled even more innocently and charmingly, making one feel tender affection for her. Really? My Emperor Donghuang? Will you not love me, not dote on me, hurt me, or kill me just because I have a bad heart? The blue saber in her hand continued to attack. With a flash of her charming figure, 7 to 8 clones suddenly appeared, and a strange fragrance wafted into Xue Leihan's nostrils. Xue Leihan cried out in pain, Xue Xian, you stupid woman, am I stupid? Am I really stupid? If you say I'm stupid, then I'll be stupid. Shui Xian smiled coquettishly, her face pure and innocent. She danced gracefully in the wind, looking indescribably graceful and graceful. But every move she made was extremely vicious. She purposely targeted the fatal points and used all kinds of methods. Shui Leihan dashed left and right, and the experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were annihilated by him one after another. But the wounds on his body were also increasing. Even though they were just superficial wounds, they were still affecting his strength more and more. The accumulation of injuries finally affected Eastern Emperor's strength, and also caused the gap between him and Shui Xian to become smaller and smaller. Eastern Emperor, you're very tired now. Shui Xian's gentle voice sounded, don't you want to rest? How about letting me take care of His Majesty? Shui Leihan really couldn't move his limbs. If he had truly hardened his heart and attacked with his full strength, even Shui Xian would have been defeated in a matter of moments, or even be heavily injured. However, it was precisely because of this that he couldn't bear to truly kill her, causing him to fall into an indescribably perilous situation where he was surrounded by dangers. Shui Xian, this vicious woman, made use of his subtle mentality that he couldn't bear to kill her. That was why she was so unscrupulous. Her targeted strategy was very successful. At this point, Eastern Emperor's fate seemed to be ominous. Fortunately, at this critical moment, Shui Qi finally arrived with reinforcements. This was a trap for both sides, and at this moment, it finally collided with each other. Seeing his elder brother covered in blood and in danger, Shui Qi went crazy on the spot. All the experts of the Donghuang Heaven also went crazy. They rushed forward without any regard for their lives, and quickly surrounded the battlefield to kill. On one side, there were tired soldiers who had been fighting for a whole night, and on the other side, there were fresh troops who had just joined the battlefield. The experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were defeated instantly, and they were utterly defeated. Screams rang out one after another. Seeing that the emperor was in danger, the experts of the Donghuang Heaven went all out. Shui Qi also took over from Shui Leihan at the first moment and faced the strongest enemy, Shui Xian. He scolded, "Heartless bitch. You still have the face to attack us." Shui Xian was furious when she heard that and fought with all her might. Originally, Shui Xian's strength was almost at the level of the Demon Empress, and she was undoubtedly much stronger than Shui Qi. But in this night's battle, Shui Xian was the main force holding Eastern Emperor back, and she had exhausted a lot of energy. Shui Qi was also an expert of the first emperor level, so the difference in strength between the two sides wasn't that big. Moreover, she was fresh troops now. Although she couldn't win against Shui Xian, it was not a problem to hold her back. After a while, the Prime Minister also joined the battle. The two experts fought Shui Xian together, and the battle here was unusually fierce. But at this moment, the Saint Emperor Palace was obviously defeated. Shui Xian couldn't help but think of escaping to save her own life. After all, in Shui Xian's heart, no one's life was more important than her own. But Shui Qi and the Prime Minister both tried their best to hold her back, and Shui Xian didn't want to be hurt by the three of them, so she couldn't find a way to escape. Finally, when the last person of the Saint Emperor Palace died under the sword of General Lan, Shui Xian decided to break out at all costs. Sadly, her decision was too late. Right now, it was already too late. Even if she risked her life to break free from the entanglement of Snow Seven and the Prime Minister, she wouldn't be able to do so because the forces of the Eastern Royal Immortal Realms had already surrounded her. Just now, she had help, but she couldn't break out. Now that there was no help, it was naturally impossible for her to break out. Seeing that they were surrounded, Shui Qi and the Prime Minister became more confident. Their attacks became denser and gradually weaved into a big net. They had the upper hand, and Shui Xian was about to be killed by their swords. At this point, Shui Xian finally lost all hope. At this point, there was no way to escape. But at this moment, when she stared at Shui Qi with her desperate and sorrowful eyes, Shui Qi suddenly became absent-minded. The sharp sword that was about to pierce her chest inexplicably stopped at that moment. She was still her sister after all. Xueqi might be absent-minded because of family love, but Xue Xian wasn't. She didn't know why the enemy would be absent-minded at this critical moment and show such a flaw that shouldn't have happened. But she firmly grasped this God-given opportunity. At this moment of despair, there was an inexplicable glimmer of hope. Xue Xian attacked with both her sword and saber, as well as her fists and feet. Break out. Chapter 2655. At that moment, the Prime Minister lost Xueqi's cooperation and was hit 3 times before he could react. Xueqi was also hit twice by her sword. Then, Xue Xian broke out of the encirclement. She actually chose Xue Leihan's direction to break out of the encirclement. The encirclement was complete. Even if she got rid of the previous 2, the remaining people were not easy to deal with. Since Xue Leihan has feelings for her, he will definitely not stop her. Among these people, although his cultivation was the highest, it was more likely for her to break out of the encirclement from him than from the others. Even if she couldn't break out, at least her life wouldn't be in danger. This was what Xue Xian hoped for. But she wasn't wrong at all. Xue Leihan did not stop her at all. He watched her break out of the encirclement. When her slim figure disappeared into the night, her voice was filled with hatred. Xue Leihan, I won't be grateful to you if you let me go today. You destroyed our life's work. This hatred is irreconcilable. One day I want you to die in my hands. Your soul will be destroyed and you will never be reincarnated. Xue Leihan sighed deeply. This was also something that the Prime Minister and General Lan could not understand. Seeing that the Divine Empress was about to die here, why did His Majesty East Emperor and Xueqi make 2 mistakes at the same time? There was a gap between Xueqi and Xue Xian, so it was reasonable for Xueqi to make a mistake in a fierce battle. Actually, it was not. Even if Xueqi was not as powerful as Xue Xian, he was still a peak expert after the First Emperor realm. Furthermore, he had the support of the Prime Minister. He already had an absolute advantage in the battle. How could he make such a mistake at a critical moment? And His Majesty East Emperor. Although His Majesty East Emperor fought for a whole night, his body was full of injuries and his strength was not as good as normal. But his injuries were mostly superficial. There were no internal injuries at all. His reinforcements had arrived in time. For an expert of his level, such a small injury would give him a chance to circulate his origin energy. Even if his injuries were not completely healed, they would be more or less healed. Moreover, no matter how much His Majesty East Emperor's energy was depleted, he was still better than Xue Xian. At the very least, he was much better than Xue Xian. If he went all out, how could Xue Xian escape? But the result was that Xue Xian escaped in his direction. Another piece of evidence that could not be considered evidence was Xue Xian's last sentence. If you let me go today, I won't be grateful to you. The latter part was fine, but the first half was a clear indication of the fact that His Majesty Donghuang had held back and allowed him to leave. This is too strange. Even if the Divine Empress could revive with the help of her doppelganger, what was destroyed was her original body. How much damage was that? According to His Majesty Donghuang's previous deductions, if his main body was destroyed, even if he could revive with the help of his clone, it would be very difficult for him to improve his own strength. How could he miss such a good opportunity? Why didn't His Majesty Donghuang and Xueqi do anything at the last moment? On their way back to the Eastern Royal Immortal Realms, this question lingered in their hearts. Donghuang and Xueqi looked equally upset. An atmosphere of depression, unwillingness, and powerlessness spread and grew. Occasionally, His Majesty Donghuang and Xueqi could be heard arguing in a low voice. It seemed that the 2 brothers were dissatisfied. Why don't you make a move? Can't you see that I'm injured? Why don't you make a move? Then why did you hold back before? Don't tell me you didn't hold back? Bastard! Shut up. The 2 of them were her elder brothers. Their hearts were equally bitter, equally powerless, and equally depressed. They sat facing each other, complained for a while, and then sighed at the same time, if there's a next time. Donghuang Xue Leihan finally spoke. Don't hold back. Xueqi rolled his eyes. He snorted in disdain. You'd better convince yourself first. When you can't make a move, don't use your big brother's strength to teach me a lesson. Xue Leihan sighed helplessly again. Suddenly, he kicked Xue Qi's private parts twice fiercely. He scolded him in a low voice. Other than using sex on me, what else can you do? What are you doing? What are you doing? Ah! Xue Qi's miserable howl resounded through the air. She hissed in cold air and lowered her voice, out of breath. Xue Leihan, you're really good. You can't bear to kill your younger sister, but you're quite willing to kill your younger brother who has always been loyal to you. You're awesome. Really awesome. I'll admire you, okay? If you can't do it, even our parents will admire you. That should be enough, right? After a round of suppressed scolding, the two brothers looked at each other. In the end, they still couldn't bring themselves to do it. Then Xue Leihan ordered to summon the Prime Minister and General Lan for a discussion. Some things had to be made clear. He couldn't keep his subordinates in the dark. If he kept hiding things, it would only cool the hearts of the loyal officials. General Lan arrived very quickly, but the old Prime Minister only arrived after a while. When he arrived, his expression was very strange. Xue Leihan didn't pay much attention to this. There's something that I need to tell the two of you. I don't know how to start. Xue Leihan was a little tired. Sitting on the chair, he was also a little lost, and there was also an indescribable sense of loss. Your Majesty, please tell us. The two of them were a little nervous. His Majesty had never been like this. This time, was he going to talk about something important? Was that why he was so hesitant? You all know that my real name is Xue Leihan, but I'm afraid you don't know about my other identity. Xue Leihan let out a long sigh. His Majesty's other identity? The Prime Minister and General Lan's hearts skipped a beat when they heard this. This was indeed something that they didn't know. They really didn't know that His Majesty had another identity. Donghuang Xue Leihan had been famous for millions of years. Who didn't know about him? What other identity did he have? On the soft couch behind, Xue Qi, who was recuperating from his injuries, coughed softly and said, "Boss, are you really going to reveal this?" Xue Leihan's face twitched painfully. He said, "I can't let my brothers bleed for no reason. It's time to reveal this secret." Behind him, Xue Qi was silent for a while. Then he said, "I understand." The words of the two brothers made the Prime Minister and Great General Lan somewhat confused. What was the meaning of this? I think both of you should remember this sentence. Xue Leihan let out a long sigh and recited, "The sky is full of clouds, the night is drunk, the world is covered with snow." How can we not remember this? The Prime Minister and General Lan laughed at the same time. These were the three biggest clans in the Heaven Imperial Court millions of years ago. The sky is full of clouds, referring to the Yun clan. The night is drunk, referring to the Zue clan. The last one was the #1 financial magnate in the world, the Xue clan. Back then, these three clans were like three legs of a tripartite balance of power and almost controlled the entire Heaven Imperial Court. However, after the three clans were destroyed, there was a period of continuous chaos. After the chaos, there was the matter of Emperor 1, Empress 1, and only Saint Monarch dominating the world. The Yun clan was actually the family of only Saint Monarch Yun Shangren. Back then, only Saint Monarch Yun Shangren gathered everyone to fight against the Holy Devil and destroyed the Holy Spirit. After that battle, the Yun clan also declined. At that time, we only thought that the Yun clan had sacrificed too much and lost too much. But now, I finally know that the head of the Yun family was actually the myriad saints' true demon. Then, after the Holy Devil fell, it's not hard to understand why the Yun clan declined. Moreover, they even supported only Saint Monarch. This exchange from the Yun clan to the Holy Emperor Palace was definitely worth it, Xue Leihan said. And the other clan, the Zue clan, was constantly weakened during the chaos of the martial world. However, in the end, the heavenly Emperor Wuqing, Zue Wuqing, finally appeared. Therefore, the Zue clan still continued its glory for 1,000,000 years. The Prime Minister said with a face full of wrinkles. That's true. It's a pity that the Shui clan, one of the three great clans, was sacrificed for Master Yun. Other than Shui Xian, the rest of the Shui clan were all killed. General Lan sighed. However, the Prime Minister glared at him fiercely. His Majesty Dong Huang did not mention this at this time to reminisce about the past. In addition, Dong Huang was originally surnamed Shui. General Lan's eyes widened as he thought of this. Looks like the two brothers have guessed that my surname is Shui. This can explain a lot. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly and sighed. My original name was not Shui Leihan. My name was Shui Xiaoran at that time. First young master of the Shui clan. General Lan only managed to say half a sentence before he was suddenly choked by the neck like a screaming chicken. Yes, the first young master of the Shui clan, Shui Xiaoran, is me. Shui Leihan sighed. The Prime Minister and General Lan looked at each other at the same time, dumbfounded. After a long time, the two of them finally reacted. Then, the Divine Empress Shui Xian, we killed yesterday, isn't she your sister? Shui Leihan nodded deeply. A look of pain flashed across his face. Behind him, Shui Qi on the soft couch also sighed softly. The Prime Minister and General Lan were dumbfounded. So that's the truth. They finally understood that His Majesty Donghuang's cultivation was much higher than the Divine Empress. Even if he was surrounded by many enemies, he would not be so seriously injured. So it was because this brother still could not bear to do anything to his sister. Your Majesty, there must be another reason? The Prime Minister asked, puzzled. It's a long story, the past is unbearable to recall. Shui Leihan sighed painfully. Back then, the competition between the big clans was fierce, and the descendants were secretly sent out. Even in the clan, it was a secret. So at that time, at most, we only knew that there was a first young master of the Shui clan called Shui Xiaoran, but no one had actually seen this person. Chapter 2656. Cloud Master pursued Shui Xian, madly, my sister. The Shui clan also approved of this son-in-law. My father also supported Cloud Master with all his might. At that time, he sent me a secret message and said, in the future, with Cloud Master as the son-in-law and me as the son in secret, the greatest glory that the Shui clan has been pursuing could be achieved in this lifetime. The Prime Minister and General Lan nodded secretly. Thinking of the situation at that time, if things had really developed as they had, the possibility of this happening was indeed very high. But at that time, I had already vaguely felt that Cloud Master was a little unreliable. So I reminded my father to be careful, but my father disagreed with my words and said, aren't all ambitious people arrogant, conceited and scheming the same? So we agreed that unless it was to rule the world, my identity as the young master of the Shui clan would never be exposed. Perhaps it was because after listening to my words, although my father didn't think much of it, he was still used to preparing for a rainy day. At the same time, the records of the identities of a few other younger brothers were also destroyed. Shui Leihan's voice became deeper and deeper. The Prime Minister and General Lan both felt a wave of sorrow and a kind of admiration. These big clans with a long history were really not ordinary people. They were indeed preparing for a rainy day and taking preventive measures. At this time, a mumbling voice came from the soft couch behind them. That's right, back then, there was also an elder who was mysteriously expelled from the ancestral home. Elder 7, so it's Shui Qi. Shui Leihan, who was immersed in the past, was instantly enraged. He turned around and kicked him. Damn it! Whose elder are you? Accompanied by a scream, the world was completely silent. The Prime Minister and General Lan were instantly petrified. It was really the first time that they saw His Majesty swearing like this. There was another shock. This blood contract who had always been rude to His Majesty was actually His Majesty's younger brother? In other words, he was also Shui Xian's brother? His Majesty, blood contract and Shui Xian, the three of them were all from the Shui clan? Shui Qi sucked in a breath of cold air and muttered, you only bully the obedient ones. You can't even bear to touch the disobedient ones. Shui Leihan sat upright, pretending not to have heard anything. The Prime Minister and General Lan looked embarrassed. He wanted to continue listening, but he didn't dare to interrupt the two brothers. However, the biggest doubt in his heart had already been resolved. The three of them were from the Shui clan. The descendants of the Shui clan were extraordinary, only 3 of them were still alive. All of them were outstanding talents. The slight discomfort that originally existed in his heart also completely disappeared at this time. Shui Xian was Dong Huang's younger sister. How could her brother bear to kill her? Even if this sister of his had done 1,000 things wrong and done 1,000 evil deeds, but to let a brother kill his own sister with his own hands, it was an extremely cruel thing. Besides, this incident also proved that His Majesty Dong Huang was a sentimental person. If a person could kill his own sister without batting an eyelid, then would he still be Dong Huang? Will just be another Saint Monarch, and the heavenly emperor of Purple Cloud, Zihao. It was also at this time that he became enemies with Guru Yun because of this incident. Shui Leihan's face was filled with endless nostalgia and sincerity. Zihao sensed Guru Yun's ambition and went to warn him alone. He told him not to get close to Shui Xian'er in the future. Therefore, he fought with Guru Yun a few times and ruined his plans several times. Guru Yun hated him to the core because of this. However, with Guru Yun's support, the Shui clan actually prospered and became unparalleled. The whole clan was rejoicing, but they didn't know that a huge conspiracy had already begun. Actually, you all know what happened after that. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. At that time, the Shui clan was annexed and my father died in an accident. The elders of the clan died one by one. It just had to be at that time. I was secretly appointed by my father to go to the fairy forest and find some heavenly crystals. The last order my father gave me in his life was to find heavenly crystals for his son-in-law and daughter to use as newlyweds. Shui Leihan smiled bitterly, but his eyes were indescribably misty. The room was silent. Then what happened in the future? General Lan asked. I remember at that time, but there was someone who offered a reward for finding the eldest young master of the Shui clan and asking him to return home and take over the family business. Yes. Shui Leihan nodded and said, I also wanted to find out what was going on. So, I once changed my appearance and returned home, and saw my younger sister, Shui Xian. After confirming my identity, Shui Xian and I hugged each other and cried. The muscles on Shui Leihan's face twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, however, at that time, Shui Xian personally stabbed a dagger into my heart. Everyone exclaimed upon hearing this. Although Shui Leihan was right in front of them, they were still shocked. Behind him, Shui Qi sat up abruptly. Big brother, why didn't you mention this before? Is this something to be proud of? What's there to talk about? Shui Leihan smiled bitterly. He pulled open his clothes and revealed an extremely hideous scar on his chest. He said, my cultivation improved by leaps and bounds in the future, and I was already at the stage where I could heal my chronic illness and reconstruct my physical body. However, I still have this scar. At that time, this dagger really stabbed into my heart. Stabbed into his heart. The 3 of them could feel Dong Huang's feelings at the same time. This stab had pierced right into his heart. Other than the dagger on his physical body, it was also a dagger that went straight to his heart spiritually. Just by listening to this, the 3 of them already felt a bone-chilling coldness. At that time, I was injured and tried to rush out. Master Yun tried to stop me, and there were also countless experts blocking my way. But I tried my best to fight back and finally rushed out. However, there were still hundreds of wounds on my body. I was chased all the way until I jumped off the cliff. Zihao was already waiting for me below. We had already prepared a corpse to be my substitute. I had already died there. From then on, I left that place. I still remember that day. I remember it clearly. How I rushed out with blood and tears. That day, it was snowing heavily and the wind was bone-chilling. My heart was also extremely cold. From then on, I completely gave up on the name Shui Xiaoran. Snow has tears and every drop is cold. From then on, Shui Leihan was truly born, until today's Shui Leihan. Shui Leihan looked up and sighed. So that's how Shui Leihan's name came about. Behind him, Shui Qi also sighed softly and said softly, "Big brother, you've suffered." Shui Leihan's nose twitched, and he hurriedly took a deep breath. Did he suffer? Until today, when he heard his younger brother's words, Shui Leihan also truly felt that he had really suffered. And that kind of suffering was definitely not something that could be understood by those who had not experienced it personally. His clan was destroyed, his parents died tragically, and when he went back to check on the situation, he was set up and killed by his own sister. Who would be able to understand the sorrow of rushing out and braving the wind and snow and being ambushed from all sides in their own clan? Who would be able to understand? After that night, Shui Xian and Master Yun were convinced that Shui Xiaoran was already dead. After that, they even set up a mourning hall, and Shui Xian wore mourning clothes to send her brother off. Shui Leihan sneered mockingly, but he felt that his heart was broken. So much so that even his laughter started to tremble. So in the future, Zihao and I traveled the world together. From a place where we had nothing, we fought for the family business we have today. In those years, we fought with Master Yun and Yuan Tianjie whenever we met. But none of us could kill the other. In the end, we fought until we became the first emperor, the only saint. Now, Zihao has already passed away, and now, the only saint has also become a target of scorn, the public enemy of the Heaven Imperial Court. The Saint Emperor Palace is also about to be completely destroyed and destroyed. Shui Leihan sighed. This Saint Emperor Palace, most of its power was built by the Shui clan. When Shui Leihan said this, the room fell into a dead silence. For a long time, no words were spoken. Cough, cough. Shui Qi, who was behind him, suddenly coughed and said, "Back then, there should be a total of 8 brothers of the Shui clan outside, right?" "Yes," Shui Leihan said expressionlessly. "As for the others?" Shui Qi's face twitched and said, "I can only confirm that 2 of them are no longer around. As for the others, I didn't get any definite news, and I didn't dare to ask you. You don't need to ask anymore." Shui Leihan was still expressionless. He said, "Except for you and me, the other brothers are long gone. Many of them died when their own sister hugged their heads and cried with them." "This bitch." Shui Qi gritted his teeth, his veins bulging, as if a curse was coming out from his throat. Tears also came out. The Prime Minister and General Lan were still silent. They were even shocked. They would never have thought that a woman, and the one who was known as the most beautiful woman in the world, would only be in her prime at that time. How could she do such a thing? How could she be so cruel as to watch her own clan being destroyed? How could she be so cruel as to kill her own brother with her own hands? Destroy her own home with her own hands? How could she bear to do such a thing? This was really something that normal people couldn't understand even if they racked their brains. They couldn't understand it at all. Chapter 2657. Cough, cough, cough. The Prime Minister coughed and hesitated, but in the end he couldn't help but say, "Your Majesty, please forgive me. I really feel that such a woman and Guru Yun's viciousness are really a match made in heaven." He gritted his teeth and said, "I've experienced a lot in my life, and I can be said to have seen through the world. But for such a heartless person, it's really the first time I've heard of such a heartless person." Sigh, Shui Qi sneered. Cloud Shangren killed his own father and destroyed his own family. Shui Xian also destroyed her own family and killed all her brothers. This pair of man and woman actually became husband and wife. This is really. The veins on Shui Qi's forehead bulged, as if he had used up all his strength, but he still couldn't finish his sentence. Really what? They're really a match made in heaven. Shui Leihan slapped the table in front of him. The table was fine. But the ruins thousands of miles away from the East Emperor Palace suddenly collapsed and turned into dust. "That's the whole story," Yizichen said. Shui Leihan looked at his 2 most important officials and said softly, "Shui Xiaoran is Shui Leihan, and Shui Leihan is Shui Xiaoran. This is East Emperor's biggest secret." "Your Majesty." Both of them had mixed feelings, and at this moment, they almost shed tears. "You've suffered." Shui Xiaoran became Shui Leihan. The carefree snow eventually turned into snow with tears, every drop cold. How carefree and unrestrained was the former? What a tranquil state of mind. The latter, however, was so disheartened and so cold and sorrowful. What kind of changes did a person have to go through to change like this? It was hard to imagine. That was definitely not a huge blow that a normal person, an ordinary person, could bear. This was undoubtedly the pain of His Majesty East Emperor's life. The deepest pain, the pain that couldn't be made up for. His Majesty didn't have to reveal these secrets. But in the previous battle, he let Shui Xian'er go because of family ties. In order for her to not be haunted by it, he had opened up this scar himself. At this moment, the Prime Minister and General Lan felt guilty and regretful, but they were also deeply touched. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The two of them had a lot of things they wanted to say, but when the words reached their mouths, they felt like they couldn't say anything. In the end, they could only bow with tears streaming down their faces. There was no need to say anything else. His Majesty Donghuang's regard for all of them had already been made clear, so there was no need to say anything more. The two of them finally understood why His Majesty the Donghuang had insisted on naming the vast snow. This was the reason. The entire world was covered in snow, Shui clan. "It doesn't matter anymore." Shui Leihan laughed bitterly and said, "Anyway, so many years have passed since then. What I feel the most regretful about, the one I can't let go of the most, is still Zihao, my brother Zihao." The Prime Minister and General Lan lowered their heads at the same time. Back then, the Purple Firmament Heavenly Emperor and the East Sovereign were sworn brothers. Looking at the world, even a sage would not dare to look directly at them. However, that heroic and majestic Heavenly Emperor of the Purple Firmament ultimately still fell under the scheme of the Sage Monarch and perished on the Heavenly Devil battlefield. This time, the strength of the Holy Emperor Palace has been completely uprooted by us. The various forces of the Holy Emperor Palace are also being disintegrated and destroyed now. Shui Leihan calmed himself down. He said, "This time, the actions of the whole world. The various branches of the Holy Emperor Palace have always been exposed under the eyes of the world. I believe none of them can escape. Except for the Sage Monarch and the Divine Empress, the others have basically been wiped out. It can be said that there are not many problems left." Shui Leihan said solemnly, "In the future, we only need to be careful. The day when we finally destroy these two people will be the day when the world will be at peace. The only thing left to worry about is the battle with the extraterrestrial demons." The Prime Minister and General Lan nodded at the same time. "This time, in the battle against the extraterrestrial demons, I want to lead the troops personally." Shui Leihan said word by word, a sharp light shooting out from his eyes. "I want to personally take revenge for my brothers." The Prime Minister and General Lan were stunned for a moment upon hearing this. Logically speaking, in such a decisive battle, General Lan should be the one leading the troops. The East Sovereign did not need to personally come to the battlefield at all. Leading the troops personally always meant that victory was not an option. The pressure was immense. And the risk was also the greatest. However, no one could refute the East Sovereign's reason at this moment. Take revenge for his brothers. Slaughter all the extraterrestrial demons. With the relationship between the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor and the East Sovereign, this was completely reasonable. There was no way to even dissuade him. "I also want to fight a bloody battle at the place where my brothers fought." Shui Leihan's eyes were calm but firm. "Blue Bridge." "Here." General Lan answered solemnly. "Immediately reorganize the East Sovereign Army. All the elite troops of the Eastern Royal Heavens are to be streamlined again. Assemble this batch of elites into one army. In this battle, the East Sovereign will not return if the extraterrestrial demons are not destroyed." Shui Leihan said solemnly, "Your Majesty." The Prime Minister and General Lan knelt down at the same time. Shui Leihan's words were too serious. Even though they knew they should not dissuade him, they still had to. The East Sovereign will not return if the extraterrestrial demons are not destroyed. What a heavy oath this was. There's no need to say any more. I've already made up my mind. Xue Leihan's eyes were extremely resolute. The two of them took a deep breath and hesitated for a moment, not knowing if they should say a few more words of persuasion or fully prepare the troops for war. Prime Minister. Xue Leihan looked at the Prime Minister. I believe you know what is needed for this battle. All the logistics, everything will be handed over to you. Do you understand this heavy responsibility? The Prime Minister's expression was solemn. Rest assured, Your Majesty. With the reserves of the Eastern Royal Heavens over these years, it is enough to support the largest-scale battle for 30 years. I guarantee that nothing will go wrong. There would be absolutely no oversights and no worries for the future. If there is, I will use the lives of 18 generations of my family to atone for my sins. Xue Leihan nodded satisfactorily. I've long known that the Prime Minister's work is the most reassuring. General Lan, from now on, the success or failure of everything will depend on you. General Lan's expression was resolute. Rest assured, Your Majesty. I swear on Blue Bridge to complete the mission. Good. Xue Leihan was silent for a moment before he said, Before this battle, we must make arrangements in advance. I plan to let Vast govern the Eastern Royal Heavens from today onwards and appoint the Crown Prince to be in charge of all matters of the Eastern Royal Heavens. Your Majesty, this doesn't seem appropriate. The Prime Minister and General Lan were shocked to the extreme at the same time. They knelt on the ground. Your Majesty is in the prime of your life. Even if you personally lead the troops into battle, you will definitely be able to return safely. Please reconsider the matter of appointing the Crown Prince. Stop talking and listen to me first. Xue Leihan's expression was serene. He said, The luck of this battle is unknown. Thinking about the defeat before thinking about the victory is a military principle. Besides, I can't be considered in the prime of my life now. My body may be strong, but my heart is already old. Especially after avenging my brothers this time, even if I return safely, I don't have the heart to continue on in this position for long. It's also time for Vast to take charge. I'm still very relieved to hand this position over to him. Xue Leihan smiled. Even if I personally lead the troops into the battle against the extraterrestrial demons. If we win this battle, the Eastern Royal Heavens will celebrate and Vast will ascend to the throne. If we lose this battle, the day Xue Leihan dies in battle will be the day Vast will ascend to the throne. Do you all remember this? Xue Leihan's tone turned cold as he looked at the two of them sternly. The Prime Minister and General Lan choked and couldn't speak, tears streaming down their faces. No matter the outcome of this battle, Prime Minister, I'll need you to take care of Vast. Xue Leihan looked at his right-hand and right-hand men with sincerity. He sighed and said slowly, For so many years, we have been monarch and minister in name, but in reality, we are brothers. The two of you must help me with this. The Prime Minister and General Lan's tears flowed like spring water as they kowtowed loudly. We can only do our best until we die. When the time comes, Xue Qi, you must also gather all your subordinates and assassins to follow me into battle, okay? Xue Leihan turned to look at his younger brother. I understand. Don't worry. Xue Qi rolled his eyes. I knew it long ago. Even if you die, you'll drag me along with you. Forget it, I'll follow you through the mountains of swords and seas of fire. Who asked you to be my elder brother? You. Xue Leihan almost couldn't help but raise his hand to give him a good beating. But suddenly he laughed again. You little brat, we'll go through the mountains of swords and seas of fire together. If we win this battle, we'll rest in the hidden forest spring and travel the world together. If we lose this battle, we'll go see our parents together. Xue Qi's eyes were a little red. He said in a nasal voice, When the time comes, what if our parents ask, Where's your sister? How should we answer? Do you know how to answer? Xue Leihan looked at him in a daze. Xue Qi sniffed and said, So, it's best to win. With that thought, the two brothers smiled with tears in their eyes. Looking at the two brothers in front of them who had gone through so much, the Prime Minister and General Lan were shocked. They couldn't help but burst into tears too. Now that the two brothers who had gone through so much were here, They smiled and talked about their past. "Oh, right, when you came in just now, why did you look a little strange? You don't look like the Prime Minister of Donghuang Heaven who usually doesn't change his expression even if a mountain collapses in front of him." Dong Huang smiled and asked the Prime Minister, "Did something happen?" The Prime Minister coughed and was stunned. Then, sweat actually appeared on his face. "This matter, he said just now that it was really nothing, but now he didn't know how to say it. He stammered and said, 'Yes, there is indeed something. I just received the news.'" Xue Leihan said with great interest, "What is it? Tell me directly." "Oh, it's like this." The Prime Minister stammered and said, "After the battle with us, the divine Empress Xue Xian fled. But for some reason, she was recognized in the 100,000 mountains and was surrounded." Chapter 2658. Xue Leihan frowned and said, "Oh?" Then, very coincidentally, the former heavenly emperor of Green Cloud, Mo Qingqing, passed by here and immediately attacked. Xue Xian, her physical body was destroyed, the Prime Minister stuttered as he spoke. He was cursing in his heart. "Who the hell gave me this news? I was delayed for a while, and then I came excitedly to report this news. But first, I heard a story from His Majesty. The real problem was, after hearing this story, he felt as uncomfortable as if there was a bomb in his mouth. When he finally finished, the Prime Minister lowered his head nervously, waiting for His Majesty's reaction. Such an outcome is good." Xue Leihan sighed deeply, then fell silent for a while and said, "Besides, she still has a doppelganger, so she won't die for a while. Besides, even if Mo Qingqing really killed her, she deserved it. Retribution is right in front of me, so how can I go and find Mo Qingqing to avenge her? How can I not have a sense of right and wrong? Prime Minister, you're thinking too much." The Prime Minister heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Your Majesty is wise, I'm stupid." When His Majesty was silent just now, the Prime Minister was almost sweating profusely. Fortunately, His Majesty's reaction wasn't that intense. "Alright, why did Mo Qingqing suddenly appear in that place?" Xue Leihan asked in surprise. "I don't know." The Prime Minister was also very confused. At this moment, a guard reported outside the door, "Your Majesty, the former heavenly emperor of Green Cloud, Her Majesty Mo Qingqing, is outside seeking an audience." Hearing this, the four people present were all stunned at the same time. Mo Qingqing suddenly appeared. Seeking an audience with Xue Leihan? What did she want to do? Especially the Prime Minister and General Lan, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They even felt that the world was really strange. This fellow had just destroyed the physical body of someone else's sister, and then she came to seek an audience with her biological brother, and there were two of her biological brothers here. This is really, that was awesome. At this moment, the two pillars of the Eastern Royal Heavens both had these words in their hearts. They were exactly the same. "Quickly invite her in." Xue Leihan said hurriedly. No matter what, Mo Qingqing was here. They were all distinguished guests. "Brother Xue." Mo Qingqing stood outside the East Imperial Palace with her hands behind her back. This former celestial emperor was currently dressed in plain clothes. His green robes fluttered in the wind, giving off a transcendent aura of transcendence. Such an outfit actually made Xue Leihan feel a little envious. Seeing Xue Leihan come out, Mo Qingqing smiled and cupped her hands. "Brother Xue actually came out to welcome me personally. Mo Qingqing really doesn't dare. I'm flattered, It's rare for Brother Mo to visit us from afar. Your presence brings light to our humble Eastern Royal Heaven." Xue Leihan warmly welcomed Mo Qingqing in. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he asked, "But I wonder why Brother Mo is here?" "Nothing else. It's just that this little brother's addiction to being an official has kicked in. I'm here to ask Brother Xue for a high-ranking official position." Mo Qingqing smiled and said, "Brother Xue, please appoint me as the Grand Marshal of the Eastern Royal Heavens Army? How about it?" Cough, cough, cough. The moment these words came out, Donghuang Xue Leihan, the Prime Minister, and the Great General all started coughing at the same time. The Prime Minister and Great General Lan really didn't expect that Emo Qingqing would actually say such a thing. This was too direct, too unrestrained, too. Wasn't it too? A celestial emperor of a generation, even if he was just the previous celestial emperor or a has-been celestial emperor, would definitely not run to another world to request to be the Grand Marshal of the army. However, Emo Qingqing did so. Moreover, he did it so calmly and brazenly. She did it right in front of Dong Huang and Xue Leihan. Dong Huang Xue Leihan stared at Emo Qingqing. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. They were speechless for a long time. Xue Leihan suddenly smiled relaxedly. Brother Emo, Xue Leihan smiled. Logically speaking, we've been brothers for so many years. If you make such a condescending request, there's definitely no possibility of me rejecting it. But, in this situation now, it's not possible. Emo Qingqing's expression didn't change. She asked in a low voice, "Oh? Why not?" Xue Leihan laughed out loud. "It's because Brother Emo has really come at the wrong time. Just a moment ago, I snatched the position of the Grand Marshal of the Eastern Royal Heavens from the Blue Sky Bridge." Xue Leihan laughed. "But if Brother Emo doesn't mind taking a step back, I can appoint you as the Deputy Commander of the Eastern Imperial Heavens Army. How about that?" Emo Qingqing was stunned. She pointed at Xue Leihan and laughed. "Xue Leihan, you're actually one step ahead of me. Good. My cultivation isn't as high as yours, and my scheming isn't as deep as yours. It's worth it to be your deputy. Deputy Commander it is. I'll do it too." Xue Leihan put his arm around her shoulder and said with a smile, "I'm afraid it's not that you don't mind being the deputy commander. I think you, even if it's a small soldier, you'll do it too. In the battle to destroy the extraterrestrial demons, to be a small soldier or a deputy commander, a marshal is nothing more than contributing to the imperial court. It's just a title." Emo Qingqing laughed loudly. Obviously, she didn't mind at all whether she was a marshal, a deputy commander, or even a small soldier. They were all old friends for 1,000,000 years. Whatever the other party was thinking, as long as they didn't deliberately hide it, it could be said that they could tell at a glance. One sentence was enough to explain too many things. Emo Qingqing's wish was very simple. She hoped to go to the battlefield of the purple cloud heavens and fight to the death with the extraterrestrial demons. However, Emo Qingqing knew herself well. With her commanding ability, if she were to purely be a small soldier, it would really be too much of a pity. It would be a waste of her talent. Since it was a battle against the extraterrestrial demons, then she should unleash her own ability and battle power to the maximum. At this time, she really didn't care about her own problems anymore. How to maximize efficiency was the problem that a ruler needed to consider. And Xue Leihan already knew what Emo Qingqing's intentions were when she said the first sentence. However, the person leading the army in this battle wasn't Lan Tianxiao but Xue Leihan himself. Emo Qingqing's ability might be above Lan Tianxiao's, so she naturally deserved the position of marshal. However, now that the one leading the army was Xue Leihan, it was a different matter. Xue Leihan asked Emo Qingqing to be his deputy not only because he agreed to Emo Qingqing's request to participate in the battle, but also because he hoped to have Emo Qingqing's help to make up for his shortcomings. Xue Leihan himself was also a master of the art of war. However, he had been an emperor for too long and had long been used to making arbitrary decisions. He wasn't used to hearing unpleasant words. In fact, in the Eastern Royal Heavens, there was really no one who dared to say unpleasant words to him. However, on the battlefield, a moment of carelessness could lead to a complete defeat. Emo Qingqing's timely arrival was the best compliment for Xue Leihan. If Emo Qingqing was the marshal, she would have the same concerns. The two of them were a perfect pair, making up for each other's shortcomings and reminding each other to ensure that nothing went wrong. Behind them, the Prime Minister and Great General Lan were both beaming with joy. This was really a great help that fell from the sky. Emo Qingqing laughed without any reservations. She waved her hand and said, "Since I'm the deputy marshal, I should have some strength. Those outside, come over and listen to His Majesty's arrangements. Enter your respective army and do what you need to do." As she waved her hand, the tens of thousands of soldiers stopped in the sky and landed with a whoosh. This army was directly under Mo Qingqing's command. They were also her most loyal subordinates all these years. Back then, after Ao Shiyun took over the clear sky heavens and ascended to the position of Heavenly Emperor, Mo Qingqing had personally persuaded Ao Shiyun to keep his people. Most of the clear sky heavens experts stayed, but these tens of thousands of people would rather die than continue to stay in the clear sky heavens and serve Ao Shiyun. We are the Heavenly Emperor of the clear sky heavens, Mo Qingqing's people. We will always be. We will never be the evil cloud Heavenly Emperor's people. Even if we die, we won't be. These people's attitudes were firm. If they didn't let them follow, they would rather commit mass suicide than change their allegiance to another master. Her persuasion was ineffective. Helpless, Mo Qingqing could only bring these people away from the clear sky heavens. Other than being Mo Qingqing's loyal subordinates, these people were all capable experts. Every one of them had at least the strength of a saint. Back then, if Mo Qingqing had really fought Ao Shiyun to the death, with just these people's help, even if they couldn't deal with Ao Shiyun himself, the number of Ao Shiyun's high-level subordinates would probably be the same as this group of people. And this was the most conservative estimate. The overall strength and quality of these people were evident. So many loyal subordinates. Xue Leihan sighed deeply. Generals, brothers, you are not my subordinates here. From this moment onwards, we are all brothers in the same trench. We will go to war together. We will destroy the extraterrestrial demons together. We will revive the clear sky heavens together. This is everyone's common goal. We will go to war together. We will destroy the extraterrestrial demons together. We will revive the clear sky heavens together. We will fight for the common goal. All the soldiers of the clear sky heavens raised their arms and shouted, their momentum overwhelming the sky. Originally, everyone still had a lot of misgivings about coming here. To the eastern royal heavens, they were after all outsiders. There were so many of them and everyone's strength was not ordinary. It was reasonable for the master to be a little wary and apprehensive about coming here abruptly. Especially, according to rumors, our Heavenly Emperor and the East Sovereign were rivals in love back then. Although they didn't know what was going on, everyone had heard of this rumor before. But with this sentence from the East Sovereign, all their misgivings and doubts disappeared in an instant. After the great battle, everyone is free to leave. Xue Leihan said loudly, but I'll say this first. Whoever doesn't come to drink my farewell wine before leaving, even if I have to go all over the world, I will find him and force him to death with wine. I will do what I say. Let's see who dares to come and try if my wine is enough and strong enough. Chapter 2660. Haha. Tens of thousands of people laughed happily at the same time. Your Majesty, don't worry. We don't have to drink other wine, but we must drink the celebratory wine, the farewell wine, and especially the wine from you. Instead, Your Majesty Donghuang should be more careful. In terms of strength and cultivation, we may not be as strong as you, but drinking wine is a different matter. Don't let us get you drunk instead. That would be embarrassing. With a burst of laughter, these people all followed General Lan and went to their own camps. Great General Lan and the majority of these people were old acquaintances. Naturally, he would make the best use of these people and not waste any of them. Amidst the cheers and laughter, the vast majority of the crowd dispersed. Brother Mo, please. Xue Leihan led Mo Qingqing into the East Emperor Palace. Mo Qingqing was free and easy. She brought the young man with her and walked in. This is? Xue Leihan asked. This is Quan, Mo Lu. Mo Qingqing smiled and patted the head of the young man beside her lovingly. This is my little brother's son. He's quite a capable one, Mo Qingqing said. Mo Lu, I've heard of him. Not bad, not bad. Donghuang Xue Leihan's gaze was a little complicated. He said, the one who killed Master Yun's son Yun Tian, is your little brother? The Prime Minister was still serving here. When he heard this, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Thinking of the sibling relationship between Donghuang and Xue Xian, Although he had absolute confidence in Donghuang, he also muttered in his heart, "Are you starting to call me brother and sister again at this time?" "Yes." Mo Lu's face suddenly twitched a little. His voice was hoarse and his spirit was also a little absent-minded. He clenched his fist tightly and said, "Actually, I didn't want to kill him." "How dare you?" Mo Qingqing was furious. He was the son of the current Thousand Saints' true demon. Why couldn't he kill him? Especially at this time, he still said such words in front of Donghuang. Wasn't he making a fool of himself? "I really didn't want to kill him." Mo Lu was a little wronged, but he still said so. Mo Qingqing was furious and wanted to beat him up. "Tell me what happened." Shui Leihan hurriedly stopped Mo Qingqing. "It was him who wanted to kill me." Stranger sighed sorrowfully. "We were competitors. However, we are also friends who have always appreciated each other. Our personal relationship is quite good. At least, I sincerely treat him as a friend. This time, he was being hunted down and came to me. I hit him, but when he was out of breath, he was out of breath. He actually wanted to kill me and impersonate me to avoid this calamity. He was very familiar with everything about me. If he had really impersonated me, no one would have been able to discover it. However, there was one thing he had miscalculated. It's me who carries my father's divine sense. As soon as he attacked, he suffered a backlash." Stranger let out a long sigh. "But at that moment I was also stunned. I never would have thought that my good friend, who I had always treated as a brother, would actually try to kill me after I had risked so much to take him in. You keep saying that you're my good brother, but you've already stabbed me in the back. If it wasn't for the fact that Imperial Father's divine will had immediately moved, I'm afraid I'll still be a confused ghost until the day I die." The stranger laughed miserably. "How can there be such a person in this world? I'm really blind. Idiot, he's been using you all along. You treat him as a brother, but he treats you as a joke." Mo Qingqing scolded in exasperation. "You're just an idiot. How can I have a son like you?" Stranger lowered his head, his face filled with disappointment. "Brother Mo, it's a good thing that young people are loyal and righteous. You can't scold him for this kind of thing." Donghuang Xian sighed. He comforted him. Originally, he still had some weird feelings in his heart. Now that he saw such a situation and heard such a thing, he was really completely speechless. So, Master Yun and Shui Xian, son, were actually such trash. How could such a person talk about justice or injustice? Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel that Stranger was more pleasing to the eye. He even felt that they were in the same boat. At the side, the Prime Minister, seeing the situation in front of him, he also heaved a sigh of relief. Although Yun Tian was the Lord's biological son, he was also the only son of the Saint Empress Shui Xian, which meant that he was Donghuang Shui Leihan's biological nephew. If it weren't for the incident just now, he would have died in the hands of his good friend. To anyone else, they would have clapped and cheered. At most, they would have said that Stranger was soft-hearted and should have killed him on sight. But to Shui Leihan, although he might not hold a grudge, he would still feel a little uncomfortable. At least, he wouldn't find Stranger very pleasing to the eye. However, at this moment, Stranger's choice might not have caught his father's eye, but it definitely caught Shui Leihan's eye. In fact, Shui Leihan's heart was even untied. It was just a reason, but it wasn't enough. For Mo Qingqing's father to see through it, it could only be said that heaven's will was unpredictable. That night, Donghuang Xen held a banquet to welcome Mo Qingqing. Only Shui Leihan, Donghuang Xen, Mo Qingqing, and Stranger's father were present. Two pairs of fathers sat at a table and drank wine. Especially when the two fathers were both celestial emperors. Although they could chat and laugh freely, these two children simply felt immense pressure sitting here, as if they were sitting on pins and needles. This was pure torture. But slowly, the two of them also started to chat. This was a family banquet and had nothing to do with diplomatic relations. Especially now that Mo Qingqing was no longer a celestial emperor, this made things even more relaxed. As the two celestial emperors drank to their heart's content, they couldn't help but talk about the situation in the heavenly imperial court. Brother Mo, actually my feelings. Don't mind it. I don't have any other intentions. It's purely for the sake of the demon-exterminating battle later. Shui Leihan said, the place where you can unleash your greatest potential is ultimately still the green sky heavens. If you return to the green sky heavens, you'll definitely be more useful. Mo Qingqing said gloomily, how can I not know this? But the problem is, Brother Shui, if you were me, would you be able to afford to lose face like this? Shui Leihan sighed. What she said was true. No matter how selfless Mo Qingqing was, it was impossible for her to work under Ao Shiyun. So he would rather look for Shui Leihan. He could give in to Shui Leihan, but he definitely couldn't give in to Ao Shiyun. Although there was no deep hatred between the two of them, and it was Mo Qingqing who took the initiative to give in. But a matter of face was enough to obstruct all possibilities of becoming friends between the two of them. Not to mention working under him? Then what would the world think? Even if Mo Qingqing didn't think for herself, she had to think for her family and subordinates. The source of this matter is still that bastard saint. Mo Qingqing said, her face red with anger. He really tricked people to death. The heavenly emperor of the green sky heavens cursed, which was rare. Obviously, the anger in his heart had already reached an unparalleled level. Such a despicable person, stealing a high position and actually deceiving people for a whole million years. If it wasn't for the recent rise of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion, I'm afraid we would have been deceived for a long time. Or even worse, maybe all of us would have become his myriad saint real spirit seed. Mo Qingqing raised a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. After so many years, we still haven't discovered his true colors. Speaking of which, we're really ashamed to death. We're equally ashamed. Shui Leihan also raised his head and drank it in one gulp. Speaking of which, this matter also erupted a little late. Mo Qingqing said gloomily, if it had erupted a little earlier, why would I have given up my position to Ao Shiyun so easily? Wouldn't it have been better if I had become the Grand Marshal of the Green Sky Heavens and led the army into the Purple Sky Heavens? But no, I've just given up my position and the war has already erupted. This matter makes me feel like I'm a deserter. I'm so ashamed. Mo Qingqing raised the wine jar and drank wildly as she scolded, damned Highness Yun. And that damned Ao Shiyun. I'm so angry, so angry. What's wrong with this? Those who should go to the battlefield, don't they still have to go? A person with a crooked voice walked out abruptly. His body was still wrapped in bandages and was wrapped up like a rice dumpling. There were blood stains all over his body. The person actually walked to the front of the East Emperor's table, slammed the table and said, I want to drink. You drink your dead head. You're already so injured and you still want to drink. If you want to die, go break your own meridians. Don't be an eyesore here. Shui Leihan kicked him out and scolded, can't you see that there are guests here? Such lack of etiquette, such lack of upbringing, really improper. Sit down and behave yourself. Mo Qingqing was stunned. Brother Shui, is this your son? To be able to be lectured by the East Emperor in such a strict manner and still call himself an elder, it must be one of his sons. Comparing the two, she instantly felt that her son was more obedient and sensible. She felt a little proud. At the side, Mo Lu looked at the vast snow. Dong Huang Tiangtai was also confused as he looked at this guy who suddenly appeared. Shui Qi had been in the East Emperor heavens for a long time, but he always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Shui Leihan had never seen him before. Mo Qingqing, open your eyes wide and look at how old I am. Shui Qi immediately lost it. Fuck, even if you don't know much, you should have some common sense. I haven't settled the score with you for the previous fight, and now you're actually slandering me as someone else's son. Your son is a dead head. You think I'm old? Shui Leihan is far from qualified. I should be the one treating him as an elder. You're the #1 assassin in the world? Blood contract. Mo Qingqing immediately recognized him. This was a big shock. Brother Shui, what's going on? When Shui Qi killed people in the clear sky heavens, he was stopped by Mo Qingqing. The two of them could be considered old acquaintances. At this moment, seeing that the number one assassin in the world was actually in the East Emperor's palace, Missouri Qingqing was really shocked. Chapter 2661. Mo Qingqing was puzzled. Why was this blood contract fellow here, and why was he so severely injured? It was just that his words were a little too much. Even if Xue Leihan didn't choose his words carefully and claimed to be old, it was fine if he retorted and said that he wasn't qualified to be called old. But to say that I should be the one calling him old was a huge taboo. This was Dong Huang in front of him. Family misfortune? Xue Leihan sighed helplessly. This is my younger brother. Your younger brother? He's your younger brother? Mo Qingqing was instantly petrified. Dong Huang actually had a younger brother, and this younger brother was actually the number one assassin in the Heaven Imperial Court. Then it's more appropriate for me to call him old. No, it's not more appropriate. There's still a problem with being almost the same person. How is family misfortune? Without my help, you would have died long ago. Let's not talk about the past. Just this time, if I hadn't arrived in time, you would have been killed by that woman. After we're done with the extraterrestrial demon, I'll find a place to live alone and never see you again. Xueqi scolded. Old is still a top expert. If I stay here every day, I'll be beaten and scolded by him like a child. I'll be a ready-made punching bag. If he's happy, he'll catch me and beat me up. If he's unhappy, he'll catch me and scold me. Who has seen such a sullen number one assassin? How dare he call himself old in front of me? If I call you old, do you dare to answer? Not only that, if anything happens, I'll have to risk my life to take it up. Xueqi muttered, full of dissatisfaction and complaints. Shut up. Xue Leihan was speechless. Will you die if you don't talk so much? Why not? Xueqi straightened his neck. At this point, Xue Leihan was completely at a loss. There was nothing he could do. At the side, Mo Lu and Vast Snow stared at the scene. Mo Lu only felt that his brain short-circuited. Vast Snow also felt that his heart was in a mess. Mo Lu came over and asked softly, "This is your uncle?" Vast Snow looked at him blankly. He muttered, "I don't know." The two of them stared at each other. After a long time, Mo Lu sighed. "I understand." Vast Snow, on the other hand, was even more confused. "What do you understand?" Mo Qingqing kept coughing. He didn't know what to say to smooth things over. Finally, he reluctantly found a topic to talk about. Why do you want to find a place to spend your days? You and your brother are both living in seclusion. It's also fun to be together with brothers. Snow 7 let out a long sigh. Old Mo, there's something you don't know. Now that I'm with him, I'm still trying my best to endure his ravaging. Isn't that because the extraterrestrial demon isn't over yet? I'm also worried that this fellow will be killed by the heavenly demon, so I've been enduring the humiliation. But when the heavenly demon is done, then I'll be purely looking for a beating by his side. Even if I don't get killed by him, I'll be disgusted to death. Disgusted to death? Mo Qingqing's interest was piqued, and her eyes were filled with gossip. What do you mean by that? She thought to herself, could it be that Xue Leihan still has some unknown special hobbies? If that was the case, then it would be greatly beneficial to one of his pursuits. Snow 7 snorted. He said, if he's just messing with me, I'll accept it on account that we're brothers. But during this period of time, this fellow has been flirting with Demon X. I reckon they've long hooked up. Once the extraterrestrial demon is done, how can he still care about me, his brother? I'm afraid he'll have long left with his confidant. From then on, they'll be together forever, and I'll only envy them. What's the point of me being with them? To be a super big shit-stirrer? How about I torture both of them together? My taste isn't that heavy. Xue Leihan's face was as red as a jujube. Shut up. Is this something you can say? His tone wasn't very strict, and from the corner of his eyes, he was still scanning for Mo Qingqing's reaction. This was the plot that the two brothers had already discussed and planned for a long time ago. Upon hearing that, Mo Qingqing was so shocked that her scalp went numb. Who did you say? Demon Exine. You mean the Demon Empress? She suddenly stood up, her eyes as big as copper bells. The two of them were shocked and didn't understand what was going on. What was going on? Sigh, the world of the older generation is really complicated. We can't understand it. Who else could it be? Snow 7 drank to drown his sorrows. There's a big chance that I'll have to call her sister-in-law soon. How depressing. When the time comes and we're together, watching them being lovey-dovey every day. It's so disgusting that I'll die of disgust. Snow 7 raised his glass and drank. He looked up at the sky and sighed, as if he was drowning his sorrows in alcohol. He looked so dispirited that he seemed to be in a very low mental state. Secretly, Xue Leihan secretly gave him a look that said, "You're very good. I admire you very much. You're indeed my younger brother." He felt very comfortable. Blood brothers were blood brothers after all. Looking at this cooperation, it's really a perfect pair, perfect and flawless. On the other side, Mo Qingqing was completely stunned, like a wooden sculpture made of clay. After a long, long time, the former heavenly emperor of Qing Shao suddenly jumped up and flipped the table over. In an instant, the soup was all over the place, but he didn't care. He grabbed Xue Leihan's collar and panted. "You motherfucker Xue Leihan, you bastard, how could you do such a thing? I'm going to fight it out with you." "Brother Mo." Xue Leihan looked innocent. "What's wrong with you? Let's talk things out." On the other side, Mo Lu and Vast Snow were caught off guard. Their heads were smashed with the soup. They looked at each other in dismay, but they didn't dare to do anything. What the heck, what's going on? Vast Snow had a fishtail on her forehead, and her eyes were full of innocence. Mo Lu wiped the soup off her face and hurriedly asked Mo Qingqing softly, Father, what's wrong with you?" "Uncle Donghuang has been alone for so many years. It's a good thing that he found a partner. We should be happy. Why should I be happy?" Mo Qingqing was furious. She grabbed her son and roared, "Little bastard, you don't know anything, so shut your mouth. No one will treat you as a mute." The stranger was scared stiff. Her father had gone crazy. Xue Leihan said discontentedly, "Brother, what are you doing? Are you complaining that I didn't serve you well? You don't have to vent your anger on your own son, right? Mo Lu is innocent. Stop pretending in front of me." Mo Qingqing was furious. "Xue Leihan, I've already counted how many guts you have in your stomach 1,000,000 years ago." Xue Leihan sighed. "I don't know anything. I really don't." He almost laughed out loud, but he actually had time to sigh and change his tone. As expected of Donghuang. At this moment, Stranger and Vast Snow both felt a chill run down their spines. Why did it feel like Donghuang was so proud? What's going on? Mo Qingqing glared hatefully at Xue Leihan, speechless for a while. Then she sat down like a deflated balloon. She muttered, "What else do you want to say? What else do you want to say? But why is it like this? Why am I always one step behind? Back then I was already one step behind, and now I'm actually one step behind again. Brother Mo, so this is what you're talking about?" Xue Leihan looked like he had just realized something. He sighed and said, "Brother Mo, it's been so many years, you should be more open-minded. You're already so old. Don't think about those useless things anymore. Why can't you be open-minded? How old am I?" Mo Qingqing was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. "We're the same age, and I'm even a few years younger than you. What right do you have to say that I'm already so old that I can't move anymore?" Xue Leihan said sympathetically, "Brother Mo, you have to be more open-minded. It's hard to find a 3-legged toad in this world, but there are plenty of 2-legged women." Mo Qingqing roared in grief and indignation. "Get lost. 3-legged toad, why don't you go and find one? You only know how to make sarcastic remarks. But why am I one step behind again?" She lowered her head, incomparably sad and indignant. At the side, the strangers who were eating and drinking could clearly see that Xue Leihan and his brother were beaming with joy, each making a victory sign. A certain young man almost spat out the mouthful of rice in his mouth. So these two fellows were in cahoots. This pair of brothers were actually the most outstanding actors. With their acting skills, if it wasn't for the fact that they got carried away and betrayed them at the end, they would definitely be best actors. Poor old man. Back then, Emo Qingqing and Xue Leihan pursued Yao Exing at the same time. Emo Qingqing was especially obedient towards Yao Exing, pestering her relentlessly. This matter could be said to be known by everyone in the Heaven Palace back then. However, in the end, Yao Exing still married the Demon Emperor Yao San 30. Xue Leihan and Emo Qingqing became losers at the same time. This was also something that Emo Qingqing had always been brooding over. So much so that this time, Emo Qingqing very readily gave up her position to Ao Xian, perhaps because of the Demon Empress. I finally have nothing to do, so I'll pursue you every day, pester you relentlessly. I don't believe that you won't be moved. As the saying goes, a strong woman is afraid of a pestering man. Emo Qingqing had a belly full of wishful thinking. I'll first settle this big matter of the Sky Fiend here at the East Sovereign's place, then I'll go to the Demon Emperor's heaven. Anyway, with my handsome appearance, I don't need to do a roll call every day. I have plenty of time. However, I never expected that I would be one step behind again. And as Xue Leihan's biological younger brother, Xue Qi was naturally very clear about this past. At this moment, of course, he had to help his own brother suppress his love rival. He would definitely spare no effort at all. Emo Qingqing looked at the table full of delicious dishes, but also lost her appetite. She continued to stare fiercely at Xue Leihan. Xue Leihan's expression didn't change and his heart didn't beat faster as he eagerly urged her to drink. Come, brother, you've come from afar, please drink more. Try it, this dish tastes pretty good, try a few more chopsticks. It's fine. Come, drink. Chapter 2662. No matter what, Brother Mo and I are old friends for 1,000,000 years. We can't affect our relationship just because of a woman. Come, let's drink. As long as you say the word, Brother I can guarantee that I'll immediately select a girl for you in the entire Eastern Royal Heaven. Xue Leihan patted his chest and said, I'll definitely let Brother Mo choose the most beautiful one that suits your heart the most. Most? Shut up. Emo Qingqing roared angrily. Xue Leihan, you're really too shameless. How can you say something like that? If I'm shameless, then I won't have a wife. Xue Leihan was unperturbed. Cough. The stranger who was listening by the side finally couldn't help but spit out the food in his mouth when he saw the older generation fighting like a child. Then he started coughing and gasping for breath. Emo Qingqing lowered her head helplessly. I've never been as shameless as you. There's no chance for me to surpass you in this generation. Yes. Xue Leihan nodded with a smile. Other than being shameless, you're also despicable. You're too despicable. Emo Qingqing accused. I'm despicable. Yes, despicable. Xue Leihan nodded repeatedly. You're a shameless thing. Emo Qingqing scolded. Yes. Xue Leihan laughed dryly. Damn it, as long as you don't interfere in my matters, I'll just let you scold me a little. The other party didn't give any specific response to her continuous scolding. Emo Qingqing gradually lost her temper as she scolded. She sat on the chair weakly and sighed. Her eyes were lifeless. You've already decided? Xue Leihan took out a jade pendant proudly. On it, it was the Demon Empress' maiden name. It was the Demon Empress handwriting. There was even the Demon Empress' personal divine sense on it. This jade pendant was naturally not given to Donghuang by the Demon Empress. It was stolen from Yao Ningning by Xue Leihan. With Yao Ningning's cultivation, not to mention being on guard, she probably didn't even know that she had lost such an important jade pendant until now. A certain someone who was far-sighted, cunning and unscrupulous came up with this plan. It was for the sake of dealing a blow to his love rival when he saw Emo Qingqing. Now that he had taken it out, the effect would undoubtedly be great. Seeing the jade pendant and sensing the person's spiritual will, Emo Qingqing was like a deflated balloon. You're ruthless, you even got the token of love. I admit defeat. Actually, you didn't fight at all. You didn't lose, you didn't lose. Shui Leihan said smilingly, there's no need to admit defeat. We're good brothers. Come, let's drink. Mo Qingqing was furious. Are you trying to say that I don't have the qualifications to fight? No. Shui Leihan put his arms around his shoulders and said earnestly, don't mention it, don't mention it. The problem is, we've been brothers for so many years. You've also seen how poor I've been all these years. Do you have the heart to snatch anything from me? Mo Qingqing's eyes widened. She stammered, I don't have the heart to snatch from you, but you have the heart to snatch from me? Shui Leihan sighed sadly. All these years, you didn't fight at all. I thought you'd given up. So, I can only work hard for my own happiness. If I'd known that Brother Mo still had such thoughts, I might have backed out. Mo Qingqing's eyes widened, speechless. His words were too artistic. Maybe he would have backed out? Then maybe he wouldn't have backed out at all. Besides, I've already pursued Exen, for so many years. I can't possibly give you a heads up and say, I'm going to pursue Yao Exen. This doesn't make sense, does it? It's also disrespectful to Exen. Shui Leihan said sincerely, Brother, you must understand me, you must understand me. Mo Qingqing was completely at her wit's end. Faced with such a shameless person, who could do anything about it? She could only raise her cup and drink, looking like she wanted to cry. As good brothers, Ekenher and I really wish to receive your blessings. Shui Leihan looked at Mo Qingqing pleadingly. Brother, you'll give us your blessings, right? You definitely will, Mo Qingqing said weakly. Shui Leihan, just kill me, on the other side. Mo Luxin really felt some sympathy for him. Dad is just too honest. Honest people are always at a disadvantage in this matter. Unexpectedly, Mo Qingqing suddenly exploded. Shui Leihan, I definitely won't give you my blessings. What bullshit blessings? I don't care what stage you've reached. I'll only tell you one thing. Right now, I'm officially declaring war on you. Shui Leihan was stunned for a moment. He said in shock, I've already said so much. Seeing that my opponent is already disheartened and that I'm about to win, why is this hothead's temper rising again? Could it be that I've gone too far and it's backfiring? Mo Qingqing was furious. Even if you're already engaged, I still want to participate in the battle. Even if you're already married, I still want to participate in the battle. Even if you're going to live in seclusion together, I still want to live in seclusion in the same place as you. This life has an end, and the future is endless. I'm going to go against you, what are you going to do about it? Shui Leihan was speechless for a while. He was obviously completely stunned. This guy is crazy? Today's matter should only be known by these few people. If the Demon Empress were to know about it, then it wouldn't be good for me. Not only would my wishful thinking of hugging the beauty fail, but it might also be completely ruined. This wasn't a joke. Shui Qi spat out a mouthful of wine and stared blankly at Mo Qingqing. Was this guy also once a celestial emperor? Why is he so shameless? He's too shameless. Anyway, I've already pestered you for so many years. I don't care if I spend the rest of my life on this. If you can be so shameless, why should I be? Mo Qingqing gulped down the wine fiercely and said angrily, Anyway, I'm no longer a celestial emperor now. I don't have any status. I'm just a shameless guy. What can you do to me, Shui Leihan? Shui Leihan covered his face in pain and lowered his head. Faced with such a troublesome person who suddenly evolved, there was really no way to deal with it. After a while, he said very gloomily, Didn't you admit defeat just now? So what if I admit defeat? I regret it now. Can't I? Mo Qingqing said self-righteously. Shui Leihan almost flew into a rage. Before he could get angry, he saw Mo Qingqing looking at him from the corner of her eyes. Shui Leihan, you're not thinking of hitting me, are you? Come on. Shui Leihan was really a little dumbfounded. He sat down without any manners and said in an extremely conflicted tone, Brother you know that you have no chance. Why you still? Sighed. He sighed helplessly. Why do I have no chance? I obviously have a chance. I'm very good at acting. Emo Ching snorted. She ate and drank in big mouthfuls of food and wine. After she was full, she wiped her mouth and stood up. Arrange a room for me right now. I want the best room. I want to go sleep. From tomorrow onwards, the battle between the two of us will officially begin. Shui Leihan was furious. Emo Ching, you're really shameless. Eat, drink and stay at my place. And now, you actually want to snatch my wife from me? How can you be so brazen and self-righteous? Emo Ching turned a deaf ear to him and left. She left behind a sentence. As long as you retreat, you can also eat and drink my food. Emo Ching held back her laughter and followed her father. She sighed that her father was indeed sharp. His counterattack was actually unparalleled. It was really impressive. Shui Leihan hurriedly excused himself and slipped away. Her father's mood was not stable now. If she stayed, she would only be a punching bag. There would be no other outcome. Run quickly. Only Shui Leihan was left facing the mess. He sighed, depressed and conflicted. Big brother, this guy still doesn't seem to have given up. This matter is not easy to settle. Shueqi came over. Nonsense. Don't I know? If it was easy, would I have to put on such a show with you? Shui Leihan said angrily, this guy has been having unrequited love for more than 1,000,000 years. He has never given up. As he said, he let out a long sigh. Luckily, I was one step ahead this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. As he thought about it, he became proud again. But no matter how much you pester me, Emo Ching, you're still one step behind. I don't believe that after Exen and I have settled our status and entered the bridal chamber, you'll still not give up. Thinking of this, he was in a good mood. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Life is so beautiful. Shueqi watched as his elder brother walked back to his bedroom, shaking his head. He was stunned for a moment. Was there a need to be so happy? Wasn't he worried that the matter of stealing Yao Tai's jade pendant and passing it off as a love token would be exposed? If this matter was exposed, not only would Emo Ching not let it go, but the Demon Empress would also be furious. If something went wrong, it would be Shui Leihan's turn to face the joint pursuit of two heavenly emperors at the same time. Why was he still so happy? Shueqi finally realized that compared to these experts after D, he was really too far behind. But just this breadth of mind, this shamelessness, he was already far behind them. One was still pestering after being rejected for more than 1,000,000 years. The other was unscrupulous in the face of his love rival. In the face of his love rival's challenge, he didn't bat an eyelid, and he even put on a show. It had been more than 1,000,000 years. Two heavenly emperors, just because of a woman, actually almost fought. I'm indeed far behind them. Shueqi murmured. They're indeed the descendants of D. I'm really in awe of them, not to mention the fact that Shui Leihan now had a strong ally and also a love rival. What would happen in the future? Turning back to Chu Yang's side, they had already reached the legendary fairy forest. Chapter 2663. Ever since Chu Yang entered the elven forest, the rich aura that was filled with the rhythm of life became clearer with each step he took. The air seemed to be so fresh that one breath would make one feel refreshed. It was almost as if one was floating in the air. As they went deeper, this aura became more obvious. However, when they were about to reach the core area, this feeling became weaker. It was as if it was on the verge of decline and could not continue. The core area was supposed to be where the aura was the thickest. However, it was about the same as the entire inner area. Is there a problem here? Chu Yang looked at the lush greenery in front of him and asked. Yes. The god of archery let out a long sigh. He did not look good. Obviously, after leaving for a period of time, the situation here had worsened. The local spring of life is here? Chu Yang's eyes were sharp. Yes, it's here. At the mention of the spring of life, the 5 elven gods felt dejected. They sighed and said, originally, this should be the lake of life. Chu Yang grinned. Lake of life? How arrogant. It's already good enough to have a spring of life. You still want the lake of life. Looking at Chu Yang's expression, the god of archery knew that he had misunderstood. He said, "Your Majesty, the elf race originally stayed in this forest because there was a spring of life here. The spring water from this spring of life overflowed very quickly. It was very strong. Back then, we obtained it by chance and treated it like a treasure. We tried our best to protect it. Here, we created a small artificial lake. This allowed the overflowing spring of life to have a place to store it. Over time, a small lake was formed here. And it was because of this spring of life that our elf race was able to gradually multiply and occupy the entire elf forest, becoming an existence that could stand on equal footing with the other heavens and earths of Heaven Imperial Court. But, perhaps after millions of years, the spring of life had reached its limit. We were shocked to find that the spring of life had started to dry up. This made us completely panic." The god of archery said bitterly, "The spring of life is a very special existence. At most, only one spring of life could exist. It was absolutely impossible for two places to appear at the same time. Since the spring of life here had dried up, it meant that the spring of life was under this starry sky. Another spring of life has appeared." Chu Yang couldn't help but stare blankly. He thought to himself, could it be such a coincidence? When he obtained it, it was only the spiritual spring. According to what the archer god said, could it be that the spring of life had already begun to dry up when the spiritual spring appeared? We searched everywhere, but we couldn't find the location of the other spring of life. The number of springs of life here decreased with each passing day. We already know where the other spring of life is. It should be slowly growing and taking shape. And once the spring of life in other places is completely formed, the spring of life in other places will be completely destroyed. The spring of life on our side will completely dry up at the same time that the spring of life forms. But, fortunately, in these hundreds of thousands of years, although the growth of life has stopped, it still hasn't reached the point of being completely dried up. Although it's decreasing every day, it can still be maintained for a while. The god of archery's face was full of worry. But 3 years ago, the entire lake suddenly dried up. Then, the water level of the fairy spring also reached the bottom, leaving only a little bit. This change has made us completely lose our heads. Wrinkles appeared on the god of archery's handsome face as he said this. Chu Yang coughed and calculated the time. It seemed that it was 3 years ago when he obtained the spiritual spring. At that time, it had already evolved into the spring of life. He really didn't expect the spring of life to be so strange. One side had just formed, and the other side really dried up immediately. Under the starry sky, there couldn't be two springs of life at the same time. Wasn't this the same as one day couldn't be 2 days, and one country couldn't have 2 emperors? Was it exactly the same? This is the spring of life. As they spoke, everyone had already entered. Speaking of which, this spring of life was similar to the one Chu Yang saw when he entered the fairy forest in the Double Heavens continent. It was just that the scale was much bigger. There were towering ancient trees all around. They were densely packed, and the branches between the trees were intertwined. After so many years, coupled with the special means of the fairy race, the trees had grown together to form a wall of trees that was dozens of feet thick. It was airtight. Under the deliberate transplanting of the trees, this wall of trees stood together and nestled together, forming a big circle. Above him, the branches were dense and lush, covering the entire sky. No light could pass through this layer of barrier. Occasionally, birds would sing happily inside, but there were no pests that would cause any harm to these towering trees. This was the lifeline of the fairy race. Every day, countless fairy race people would take care of it. Not to mention pests, even ants wouldn't be harmed. The god of archery nodded slightly. The 18 elders of the fairy race immediately stood up. They gave the order. Open the fairy realm. Under the operation of the 18 elders of the fairy race, these fairies pressed their hands on the tree wall at the same time. Waves of green ripples gradually spread out. Green smoke gradually appeared in the wall of trees that was originally impenetrable. In front of Chu Yang and the others, A part of the wall of trees gradually became illusory and hollow. It was like an illusion in the water, rippling with the water. After a while, a door appeared in front of everyone amidst the changing mist. This dark green door was like a huge piece of jade, without any other colors. "Your Majesty, please." The 18 elders bowed at the same time. They looked at this door like lowly mortals looking at the palace of the gods in the sky. It was like they were on a pilgrimage. Their eyes were filled with fanaticism. It was like they were on a pilgrimage. It was like they were worshipping. Chu Yang, Mo Qingwu, Zi Sheqing and the others walked past, their clothes fluttering. Only the 5 fairy gods followed behind them. As for the 18 elders who made this door appear, they only bowed to the ground and didn't dare to get up. They only had the authority to make this door appear, but they couldn't really step into this door and understand everything behind this door. Chu Yang and the others walked slowly into this mysterious green door. Immediately after, a dense green mist rose and covered the door once again. When Chu Yang walked in, he realized what the god of archery had meant when he said, "We created a small lake," and what kind of concept it was. As far as the eye could see, the so-called lake had long dried up, revealing the bottom of the lake. The reason why he could still see the concept of the lake and the size of the lake was because the entire bottom of the lake was actually made of completely green elven stones. It extended to a height of no less than a few hundred feet. It was stuck to the tree wall and was airtight. In fact, if it was called a lake, it would be better to call it a super huge bowl, because the surface of the lake was definitely irregular. Only the bowl was perfectly round. Although the lake had dried up, the walls of the lake were still vaguely moist. Inside, there were still countless fairies guarding it. These fairies were the guardians of the secret realm. They lived their entire lives here. As long as the spring of life existed, they couldn't leave. In the center, there was a small well filled with greenery that was made entirely of top-grade elven stones. It was swallowing and spitting out green mist. At the end of the mist, there was a faint brilliance that constantly flashed. This brilliance was not unfamiliar to Chu Yang. In fact, it was very familiar. This was because it was the power of the spring of life. It surged in the mist, creating mist. Looking at this spring, Chu Yang couldn't help but feel a little emotional. How many years had it been since he obtained the spring of life until now? However, the things that he had experienced in this period of time made him feel as if the sea had turned into mulberry fields. Just as he was about to walk over, Chu Yang suddenly froze. As if he had figured something out, he said, "This isn't right." The arrow god asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" Chu Yang said, "Just now, you mentioned that there is only one spring of life under the same starry sky. But the problem is, although the spring here has dried up, there is still a spring in the Chongtian continent that I left." The arrow god blinked and said, "I don't really understand what you mean. Am I not clear enough? What I mean is that I also have one spring of life on me." Chu Yang said, "I used the spring of life in my body to revitalize the spring of life in the Chongtian continent. Based on the current situation, even if your place is gradually drying up, it hasn't completely dried up yet. It's still the spring of life. It's just that the amount of water flowing out is extremely small. This means that there are at least 3 springs of life in this world. In other words, what you said earlier about the uniqueness of the spring of life doesn't make sense here. Do you understand what I'm saying?" The archer god was suddenly enlightened. However, at this moment, the other 4 elf gods, including the archer god, looked at Chu Yang with endless worship in their eyes. The arrow god's voice trembled as he said, "If that's the case, the spring of life on you isn't an ordinary spring of life. This is because an ordinary spring of life must have one life and one death. When one spring of life dries up, another spring of life will be born. There are no exceptions. However, to be able to create another spring of life without any damage to yourself, from what I know, there is only one type." Chapter 2664. He looked at Chu Yang, his voice trembling as if he was about to cry. "The spring of life on you, is it called Holy Spirit Spring?" Chu Yang spread out his hands and said, However, I have always used it as the spring of life. The effect is about the same. I didn't find much difference. At this moment, the group of elves guarding the spring of life fainted in unison. It was purely a collective action. My God, Holy Spirit Spring. I must be dreaming. Such a good thing. How can it not be a dream? Even if it is a dream, let me wake up later. The arrow god and the other 4 brothers were so excited that they almost fainted. They stammered. It's like this. The Holy Spirit Spring is a divine item that has always only existed in legends. It is equivalent to the spring of life. It has never appeared in a physical form. They stammered and even coughed again. They had really lost their composure. After a long, long time, they calmed down and said in a deep voice, "Once the Holy Spirit Spring appears, all the springs of life in the world will stop at the same time." As for the Saint Spirit Spring, in terms of effectiveness, it is only slightly better than the ordinary spring of life. However, it is a divine spring that can grow and evolve on its own. No one knows how far this evolution will take it. The only thing we know is that its initial name should be the Vitality Spring Water. The Vitality Spring Water is filled with vitality. Yes, that's the name. Chu Yang nodded. Then, through the gradual absorption of heavenly treasures. In a specific space, it will grow into spiritual spring water. Then it will go one step further. Then it will be the spring of life. When golden spots appear in the spring water in a green mist, it means that it has become the Holy Spirit Spring. The arrow god looked at Chu Yang nervously. "Your Majesty, your Holy Spirit Spring is now. It is different from what you said. It still looks green now, but it is very faint. In a very quiet green atmosphere, there are faint 7-colored colors constantly jumping. It is not completely golden." Chu Yang frowned and said, "A while ago, there were golden spots. There were indeed golden spots, but now it has become 7-colored. That's not a bad thing, right?" Plop. The arrow god and the other elves sat on the ground. He hugged Chu Yang's thigh and said, "Your Majesty. Your Majesty." Even with the elven archer god's millions of years of experience, he was completely speechless and lost his composure. Not only him, but the other elves, such as the god of strength, were also trembling. They no longer had the elegance of the legendary elves. Inside the secret plane, all the elves were kneeling on the ground. Everyone was so excited that they were about to explode. It's actually a heavenly Holy Spirit Spring. It's actually evolved into a heavenly Holy Spirit Spring. An elf gasped. Chu Yang frowned. He slowly walked to the mouth of the fairy spring and looked down. Immediately after, he exclaimed in surprise, "Aya? Isn't there nothing left?" The entire mouth of the well was filled with dense green fog. It was as if it had condensed into a solid substance. An ordinary person wouldn't be able to see the bottom of the well. However, with Chu Yang's current level of cultivation, he could see through the green fog with one glance and directly reach the bottom of the well. The archer god and the others revealed bitter expressions. Yes, it was indeed almost completely dried up. When they walked out of the elven forest to fight the heavenly demons, there was still a little bit of the bottom of the fairy spring. But now, only the soil at the bottom of the well was still moist. As for the spring water, there wasn't even a little bit left. If the Elven Empress didn't reappear, the Elven Emperor's seal would be formed again, and Chu Yang's arrival, there wouldn't be any elves under the sky of the Heaven Imperial Court for at most 100 years. "Your Majesty, please do something." All the elves knelt on the ground neatly, tears streaming down their faces. This scene was magnificent, but it also made one feel extremely sad. Chu Yang sighed. He was about to take out the spring of life when he suddenly hesitated. He turned his head and asked, I created a new spring of life here. My own spring of life won't disappear just like that, right? At least, my brother's spring of life in the Heaven Imperial Court won't disappear, right? This is definitely not going to happen. The archer god said seriously, "What you have is the Heavenly Holy Spirit Spring, also known as the Spring of Life. It has already surpassed the original scope of the Spring of Life. Although it will absorb all the power of the Spring of Life when it's first formed, once it's formed, It can create another spring of life anytime, anywhere, in every spring that once existed. Moreover, it will never dry up. This is the greatest use of the heavenly Holy Spirit spring. Furthermore, it was said that the spring of life that had been nourished by the heavenly Holy Spirit spring would exceed the limit of only one spring water. The elf clan that possessed this kind of spring water would prosper forever, and would never decline for the rest of their lives. Because this already represents the recognition of the heavens and earth. Of course, the elves also need to not do evil and perverse things. Otherwise, if they have a guilty conscience, the heavens and earth will be our witness. The heavens and earth will naturally take back the protection of the elves' fate. The only way to be eternal is to have a clear conscience and be loyal forever, the archer god explained in detail. Only then did Chu Yang relax. If that's the case, then it's good. Even if my spring really disappears, it's nothing. What I'm most worried about is that brother of mine. If he finds out that his spring of life has suddenly disappeared, he will definitely come after me. Jianghu and the others thought of Duke Yu's temperament and couldn't help but smile. Once it was gone, Duke Yu would definitely come after Chu Yang with his life. Under the gazes of the elves, Chu Yang's body slowly floated up. Then, with a flash of light in midair, Chu Yang's calamity sword appeared in his hand. Then, Chu Yang activated the heavenly Holy Spirit spring in the calamity space. A flow of 7-colored brilliance slowly appeared at the tip of the calamity sword. Then, drops of water, mixed with the 7-colored brilliance, slowly dripped down. The entire space was suddenly filled with 7 colors and bright stars. It was like the most beautiful dream. When the archer god and all the other elves saw such a miracle, they all knelt on the ground at the same time. Hot tears flowed down their cheeks as they prayed in the most pious way. They wished that they could immerse themselves in this beautiful dream and never wake up again. In midair, the dense branches that had long covered the sky seemed to have become transparent at this moment. It was as if they had disappeared. At this moment, it should be daytime in the outside world, but there wasn't the slightest bit of dawn in the sky. Instead, it was the gentle and beautiful moonlight that shone down. The sun and moon were also reversed at this moment. The moon in the sky was as big as a round plate. It seemed to be hanging above everyone's heads, as if it was within reach. Look, the moon god is also sincerely blessing us and the elves. In the elven forest, all the elves knelt down quietly at this moment, praising the most sacred situation in front of them. Countless extremely pious and pure psyche power and wish power slowly rose from the elven forest and merged with the purest, most beautiful and most sincere moonlight between heaven and earth. It illuminated the earth and the universe. Such pure willpower was reflected back to the moon, and the moonlight became even more pure and bright. An invisible force silently flowed down from the vast sky, but it was also surging and surging downwards. Countless pure and true moonlight power poured into Chu Yang, who was now pouring spring water into the spring of life. Chu Yang stood quietly in midair. At this moment, moonlight flowed around him, as if he was covered in a layer of holy light. It floated gently beside him. At this moment, Jianghu, Zi Sheqing and the others looked at their beloved with eyes full of enchantment. This is my husband, the man I love the most. At this moment, he was like an omnipotent god. He was creating a great miracle between heaven and earth. Billions of creatures bowed down to him. 3,000 worlds were silent. Only a stream of rainbow-colored water poured out from the tip of the calamity sword and slowly poured into the spring of life. The mouth of the spring, which was originally dried up and had already poured out the last bit of the source of life, suddenly began to spew out green mist like a geyser. The mist carried specks of bright light as it gurgled out continuously. Not long later, the entire elven mystic realm was shrouded in this green fog. Everyone felt as if they were floating in the green fog. Even those who were close to them felt as if they were floating in the clouds. They were so far away, as if they were so close yet so far away. The sound of flowing water was like the most beautiful music at this moment. All the elves were moved to tears. They could not get enough of it. Gradually, All the elves could clearly feel that the spring of elves had started to echo with ding dong sounds. This meant that the spring of elves had started to recover, and its source of life had started to pulsate. It no longer swallowed the spring water of the spring of life, but started to store it. As long as a certain amount of spring water was stored, the spring of life would be rejuvenated. Before all the elves could cheer, a light flashed on the forehead of the new elf emperor in the sky. The elf emperor's seal suddenly left his body and floated 3 feet in front of Chu Yang's forehead, slowly circling. Every time it circled, it would shoot out a ray of green light. The calamity sword flashed and suddenly shot out a rainbow-colored stream of heavenly Holy Spirit spring water that was as thick as a water bucket. Under the gaze of all the elves, who were so surprised that they almost fainted, it surged into the spring of life. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. The green fog of the spring of elves shot up into the sky at this moment with a boom. It actually filled the entire sky and covered the entire elven forest. Countless life auras and pulsations of life engulfed the entire forest. Chapter 2665. All of the flowers and trees in the elven forest seemed to have eaten some sort of miraculous elixir at this moment as they crazily grew. Many of the old trees that had stopped growing suddenly sprouted new shoots at this moment. In the blink of an eye, they swayed in the wind, and their trunks gradually thickened. In the open space, countless tender green sprouts also broke out of the ground and grew in the wind. In the blink of an eye, they had grown to the height of a person. Then, they continued to grow taller and taller until they became a mature tree. Millions of elves were shocked to see such a miracle. They cheered loudly and ran to spread the news. Singing and dancing, cheering and jumping, the entire elf forest became a sea of joy. Those elves who were older all felt that the spring of life now was definitely very different from before. Its effect was stronger. Thus, the effect it could display would be even greater. All the elves who were injured and sick instantly recovered from their injuries at this moment. They seemed to be a few years younger. Some elven powerhouses even felt that their cultivation was also slowly improving. Heaven, earth, moon, God bless the elf race. Long live the elf emperor Chu Yang. Without anyone organizing it, all the elves shouted spontaneously. Everyone's eyes were filled with tears of joy and happiness. Heaven has pitied us. Moon God has pitied us. Our elf race can actually have such a day of joy. In the secret realm, the spring of life was already full. Inside, the water was clear and gurgling as it flowed into the lake of life built by the elves. However, at this moment, the spring of life that flowed out was neither the original pure light nor the colorful light that Chu Yang poured out from the tribulation space. Instead, it was spring water. It was filled with faint golden light spots that were constantly flashing golden spots. The arrow god and others looked at the spring of life in front of them in disbelief. Suddenly, they kowtowed and shouted in ecstasy, "This is the Holy Spirit Spring! The Holy Spirit Spring! God! Thank heaven, thank moon god, thank his majesty the elf emperor! Thank heaven, thank moon god, thank his majesty the elf emperor!" He couldn't speak properly. Tears streamed down his face as he tossed and turned, only to say one sentence. Thank heaven. Thank moon god. Thank his majesty the elf emperor. Chu Yang understood their current feelings very well and didn't try to persuade them. He just watched with a smile. At this moment, the heavenly Holy Spirit spring had already stopped its output. It was still thriving. Spring water gushed out of the well and flowed into the dried-up lake of life. In this small lake, the water of the Holy Spirit spring that was flickering with faint golden spots was gradually increasing. Gradually, it overflowed the bottom of the lake and overflowed the center of the spring. The water level was still rising. With both hands, the strength god took a sip of the Holy Spirit spring water, cherishing it immensely. Suddenly he burst into tears. A man does not easily shed tears, only because he has not yet been grieved. Although this was the time to be sentimental, but it was also a moment of joy, and the tears of a man were flowing freely at this moment. I'm afraid that since ancient times, there hasn't been any fairies as happy as us. It's done. Chu Yang looked at the gurgling Holy Spirit spring water and spread out his hands. It was only a matter of time before the Holy Spirit spring water filled up this man-made lake. He floated down and stood beside Mo Qingwu. But no one paid attention to him. Or rather, no one noticed him at all. Everyone's eyes were wide open, gazing at the beautiful scenery in front of them. At this moment, this place was directly a paradise on earth. Even calling it a paradise on earth wasn't enough to describe it. Chu Yang quietly reached out and hugged Mo Qingwu's small waist, holding her in his arms. "I'm so thin. It's as if I can pinch it with one hand." The so-called waist that can be hugged is nothing more than this, but Mo Qingwu didn't seem to notice this at all. She just snuggled in Chu Yang's arms, her eyes shining with a dreamy light. She murmured, "Chu Yang, in the future, nothing will happen. You can also make a forest like this. Roar, we can live in such an environment. Wouldn't it be like living in a dream every day? That kind of day is the real day of immortals." Chu Yang nodded and said, "That makes sense. When things are stable, we can make a forest like this that only belongs to our family." But he smiled bitterly in his heart. What does this little girl know? She's just intoxicated by the blurry atmosphere in front of her. If we can really live in such an environment, of course, the fairy race would be more than happy. But the problem is, we're not real fairies after all. Although this spring of life is a treasure, it's still water at the end of the day. Shrouded in the humid air every day, not to mention clothes, even the bedding will inevitably be damp. How can we stand it? If it really comes to that, we'll probably have to use our energy to dry the bed before we go to sleep every night, right? Although this isn't too troublesome. But how unromantic would that be? Women, sometimes they only care about a moment of romance and neglect the essence of life. When husband and wife live together, they often roll around in bed naked and fight. That's the happiest moment. As Chu Yang thought about it, a lecherous smile appeared on his face. Men all understand. Big brother doesn't need second brother to pretend to be Taoist or whatever. The big hand around Mo Qingwu's waist also gradually began to move upward. His face was still serious and contemplative, but one hand was advancing toward the beauty's strong peaks. Mo Qingwu was still intoxicated as she looked in front of her in a daze. "So beautiful." Suddenly, there was a soft exclamation. She pulled Chu Yang's hand away from her chest and whispered coquettishly, "There are so many people now, what do we look like? Don't move." The little girl's face had already turned red. She peeked at the others who didn't seem to notice what was going on here. Only then did she feel relieved. If others saw it, she would die of embarrassment. Chu Yang leaned close to her small ear and whispered into it, "Okay, I understand what you mean. There are people here, so let's not move. When there's no one, let's move." Mo Qingwu was so embarrassed that she said angrily, "You big pervert. I didn't mean that. When there's no one, you're not allowed to move." Chu Yang wailed and said, "How can you be like this? I'm going to suffocate to death." "Qingwu, when you were in that underground world last time, you once asked me, whenever we get out, you'll let me eat you. But we've already been out for more than a year. You still haven't fulfilled your promise? You're making me very sad." Mo Qingwu's face and ears turned red. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws fiercely. "When did I say that? I've never said that. You must have heard wrongly, you must have." Chu Yang was dumbfounded. He tried his best to persuade her patiently. "Qingwu, be good. As a person, you have to be eloquent and trustworthy. A person can't live without trust. We can't be the kind of people who don't keep their promises." Mo Qingwu snorted. She wrinkled her nose and rolled her eyes, showing that she was ignoring him. A small hand quietly pinched Chu Yang's ear and gave it a hard pinch. Then, Chu Yang felt a sharp pain in his left waist, back waist, right waist and ear at the same time. The 4 parts of his body were twisted more than 180 degrees. He almost screamed out loud. Turning his head to look, he saw Wu Qianqian standing quietly on his left. Her small hand was pinching the soft flesh on the left side of his waist. She was turning it clockwise, and the degree of rotation was more than 180 degrees. Tai Budian stood on his right with an indifferent expression. One of her hands naturally hung down, pinching the soft flesh on the right side of his waist. She turned it counterclockwise, and the degree of rotation was even greater than Wu Qianqian's. Zi Xiecheng stood behind him, pinching a piece of flesh on the back of his waist without any scruples. She turned it clockwise, and then turned it counterclockwise. The degree of rotation was the highest among all the women. As for Mo Qingwu's small hand, she was exerting force on his ear. The degree of rotation was the smallest among all the women, less than 10 degrees. That won't do. This is his ear. Minister Chu almost cried in an instant. Why are all the women so proficient and similar in this method? For parts of my body being attacked at the same time, and I can't even resist. Is there any man in this world who can be more miserable than me? Having more wives may not be a good thing. Chu Yang wailed in his heart. If his wailing were to spread out, perhaps all the men in the hundreds of billions of people in the entire Heaven Imperial Court, except himself, would have a strong urge to beat him up. This guy is simply too cocky. Such an ungrateful person is simply the public enemy of all the men in the world. No, the public enemy of all men. Aren't there still male demons and male elves? It's such a sacred moment now, don't make trouble. The four women warned Chu Yang sternly in his ear at the same time. Chu Yang looked up to the sky and sighed. Sacred moment? Isn't this so-called sacred moment created by me? Now I can't even speak. Heavens, earth, that moon goddess, is there still any justice? Feeling the sharp pain coming from all four parts of his body at the same time, and being sternly warned not to speak, the elf's ecstasy lasted for a long time. Just when Chu Yang felt like a year, he finally saw the god of archery leap over. Then he hugged Chu Yang fiercely with a face full of irrational ecstasy. Chu Yang was passively bear-hugged by an old man. Yes, an old male elf. Your Majesty! Your Majesty! We've succeeded. We've exceeded our expectations. Mo Qingwu and the other three quietly took a step back. Then they saw all the elves in the secret realm, whether they had white beards or young and handsome ones, whether they were male or beautiful ones, pouncing over with ecstasy. In an instant, they drowned Chu Yang. From today onwards, this day was set as the grandest festival of the elves. The name of this festival was Sun and Moon Shine Together Festival. The moon goddess in the sky, Chu Yang on the ground. Sun and moon shine together. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.